of the governing board. So our governing board meeting is in person today at the Foundation for California Community Colleges here in Sacramento. So thank you all for hosting us. Thank you to the members of the public who have joined us today, and also for those of you that are joining us virtually. Next slide. I wanted to make a quick note about the translation services. To listen into comments given in Spanish, for example, please select the globe icon at the bottom of the screen that says interpretation. Then select language interpretation audio and your language, such as Spanish. Then you will hear a live rendering of the comments in Spanish. I will pause for a moment to let our interpreter translate. All right. Thank you. Before we start into today's work, our agenda items, I want to take a look at what's in front of us. There are 24 agenda items. Our agenda, which is posted on the C2C website, specifically notes that the agenda items will be accepting public comment on. So today we will be voting on 12 of those items, and there will be about 14 opportunities for the public to engage. Should there be moments that the public would like to comment and we do not have it open for comment, public can raise their hands so that we can incorporate that participation. So for example, that might be on item 6 or any of those other ones that are informational. If you're a member of the public here with us here in Sacramento and would like to make a comment, we'd like to request that you complete a speaker split. So that I can call you by name.
Así que pueden ser llamados por su nombre en este momento.
And that the record can be full and complete. However, this is voluntary, so please give the speaker slip.
Y esto podría ser completo, sin embargo.
And in Toronto. Can you identify yourself? There you go.
Puede identificarse usted
I'll
mismo.
do my best to call on everyone who's applied a slip for the agenda item and
La mejor manera que vamos a llamarlos a cada uno.
We now also have folks that are joining us by Zoom.
Así que,
Excuse me, this is the interpreter. If I could interject, please.
Yes.
This is the interpreter speaking. I'm hearing very bad audio. Also, I am hearing Spanish interpretation at the same time. As an ASL interpreter, I can't interpret.
One moment.
Thank you.
So Jeanette, you're the voice that we're hearing, and you should be in your the separate room. Can we provide you a moment?
Okay, I haven't been assignated yet, so okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
Apologies, one moment. Okay, thank you, Jeanette. My apologies. I've now set you up. Thank you, everybody. This was a good learning experience.
So So once again, for those of you that would like to make public comment with us here in the Sacramento room, please, if you would use the speaker slips and hand them to Shannon, that is voluntary.
I'm sorry, this is the interpreter again. I cannot understand the speaker. The audio is muffled and sounds very distant.
Is this better?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so I will do my best with my speaking voice. Please let me know if you're unable to hear me. So for those of you that are in the remote room in Zoom, if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and we will do our best to call on you, and then you can provide your comment. Traditionally, we will allot 2 minutes per public comment. If we have more than, say, 10 people or so that would like to comment on an agenda item, we will reduce the speaking time to 1 minute to accommodate all the speakers. We have a very full agenda today, and our plan is to end today's meeting in the late afternoon. We anticipate taking a 30-minute break around noon, and we hope to have about a 10-minute break in the afternoon around 2:30. Before I call this meeting to order, a few reminders. I ask that members of the governing board and members of the public, please turn your phones on to silent. I also ask that all the folks that are in the room be as quiet as possible for our accessibility purposes. As we have just heard, the mics pick up everything or they don't. The background noise can be difficult with our interpretation services, so if you can please be aware of that. We appreciate your cooperation. Additionally, you may notice that our board members have devices with them during the meeting. That is for them to access the board materials. They may be on their laptops, phones, or other devices. I also ask that when members of the governing board are speaking, that they introduce themselves, and please say your name and then go into your comment or your discussion item. That will help with us keeping the minutes of the meeting accurate. The camera angles in this room can be very tricky, so we would like this meeting to be as transparent as possible for the folks that are joining us virtually. I believe that's the primary camera. So if you can keep that in mind, that would be super helpful. Today's meeting will be run according to Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act as required by law. Next slide. All right, I would like to call this meeting to order at 9:44 a.m. and ask that Mary Kate Cruz Jones please call the roll.
Member Fong.
Here.
Member Tagorda.
Here.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Here.
Member Cifuentes.
Present.
Member Cochran.
Here.
Member DeGear.
Present.
Member Elo Rivera. Member Evans.
Here.
Member Frigiueli.
Here.
Member Hetz. Alternate Mar in for Member Irwin.
Here.
Member Jazz.
Here.
Alternate Reyes for Member Laird. Member Lee.
Here.
Member Moldoff.
Here.
Member Ohanian.
Here.
Member Payne.
Here.
Member Romero.
Here.
Member Vu.
Here.
Member Winkler.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. All right, so agenda item 2 is the approval of meeting minutes from the May 10th quarterly board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes? For those of you that are following along, you may access the minutes from your board materials. If you're in the room, there are copies in the back. Hearing none, may I ask for a motion to approve the May meeting minutes as submitted?
Move.
Moved by member Vu,
Second.
seconded by Gavin Payne. Okay, Kate, would you do a roll call vote for us?
Perfect. Member Fong. Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes.
Yes.
Member Cochran,
Yes.
Member DeGear,
Yes.
Member Ella Rivera, Member Evans,
Same.
Member Frigielli,
Yes.
Member Hatz, alternate Mar for Member Irwin,
Yes.
Member Jez,
Yes.
alternate Reyes for Member Laird, Member Lee,
Yes.
Member Moldov,
Yes.
Member Ohanian,
Yes.
Member Payne,
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Winkler.
Yes.
The motion passes. In total, we have 16 ayes.
Thank you. All right, the motion passes. So agenda item 3. Next slide. Thank you. So for this agenda item, we will be swearing in our new board member, Nathan Evans. At our last governing board meeting in May, the governing board thanked member Alva for her service and the board wished to her well on her new endeavors. We are pleased to announce that in her place, Nathan Evans has been appointed to the California State University position on the board. Dr. Nathan Evans currently serves as the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academic and Student Affairs for CSU Office of the Chancellor. In this role, he serves as Chief Academic Officer and Enrollment Officer for the CSU system. Previously, he served as Associate Vice Chancellor and Chief of Staff for the Academic and Student Affairs Principal Advisor to ASA's Executive Vice Chancellor on Policy Development, Strategic Planning, and Organizational Development for Academic and Student Affairs. He serves as the division's primary representative for engagement with California's other higher education systems, the legislature, and state officials regarding CSU academic and student affairs matters. Member Evans comes with a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we are so privileged to have him here seated, a member of our board. I'd like to welcome Undersecretary Ingenito of the Government Ops Agency, who will be swearing in Member Evans for us today. Undersecretary, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. And I think we're supposed to face
Yes.
that camera, so come on over. Very nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you as well. Thank you.
You can read over my shoulder, repeat after me. We can do this a number of different ways and just state your name in the blank.
Absolutely.
So please raise your right hand. I
I, Nathan Evans,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the state of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and the Constitution of the State of California,
That I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion.
or purpose of evasion,
And that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome.
I think I'm this one. I think we're this one. Do we know? Am I the bottom signature or the top signature? The bottom? Sloppy, sloppy. There you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that is for you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Undersecretary. Next slide, please. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 4, which is an update from the Cradle-to-Career office. I'll pass this over to Marianne Bates, our executive director, who will provide us an update on the progress of the office, hiring, progress of the data system, and so forth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy.
It's wonderful to see you all here this morning. It's nice to be back in person. And I was reflecting on where we were a year ago. And we developed this ambitious 5-year timeline that's been up on the website for the past year, and the annual work plan that you all reviewed last year. And at the time, only one of our current directors, which is Dan Lamery, was already on board. And so I remember the feeling I had last August when I was presenting this work plan and thinking, I really hope that we'll be able to hire an amazing team to actually do this work. And we have been able to, and you can see much of the team is here in the room today, and I'm really excited about that. We can go on to the next slide. This is, don't try to read this. What I want you to experience here is the green check marks on the page. So this is last year's 5-year projected timeline. This is what you reviewed a year ago. The column in green was year 1 that had already passed. Year 2 is the fiscal year that just ended. And that's the purple column. And we achieved many of the items in there. So we've established our office. We hired those initial 16 positions. I'll zero in, of course, on the things that don't have a check mark. So in the top row, you see there's one without a check mark that's moving to new space. It turns out it's far more complicated to move to new space than I originally anticipated, but we're really excited. We have a great location that we've been working on. Leslie Taylor has been spearheading this work, and we're going to have a wonderful space by this time next year that's curated for you, all 21 of you, to be able to have your board meetings, our advisory board meetings, our community and engagement work, and all of that with a bit of our office space around the outside too. So we're really excited about that. On engagement, we'll highlight a couple of exciting things today, but really, thank Shannon for all of her leadership in setting up that work over the past year. On analytical data, there are a couple things without check marks, so we'll talk about that in a minute. It took us longer to go through procurement than we had hoped last summer. We had some things we needed to make sure get extended, and some of that work was more complex and took longer than we had originally anticipated, that I had originally anticipated. I'll take ownership of that. So a lot of that work is getting moved to year 3. So just want to be transparent about that. And then finally, on the operational tools, really excited about the work that we've been able to do with our partners at CCGI with the Scale Up with California Colleges .edu. Nice to see Tess here today too. And the work that we've started with the Community College Chancellor's Office on scoping out e-transcript as well. So big picture, we're very happy about the progress that we made on the 5-year timeline that we worked on last year. Okay, next slide. So let's zoom in on a couple of specific areas. As I mentioned, we focused on filling the initially authorized team size. So we had 16 positions approved initially. You have details in onboard with our org chart, and you can get to know the team both here today and through those resources. And as you know, we were excited that our budget request was approved. We now have 10 additional positions that we'll be filling in this year. So we'll have a team size of 26, and we're very excited about that. One thing I wanted to highlight, executives are held accountable for and often credited for the success of an organization's work. But the reality is that institutions function based on the treasure of institutional memory that people who are the longtime public servants carry, who know the context, who know the procedures, who know the nuances of the law. And by definition, because Cradle-to-Career is brand new, we don't have that within Cradle-to-Career as an organization, but we're very fortunate to have multiple people on the team who have deep experience in the state. So I'm going to highlight just a few. So Leslie Taylor, who brings over a decade of experience with CDE to our work, has been absolutely instrumental in all of our operations work. We have Muni Chitneni, who's a longtime leader in technology within the state. She's our principal data architect. Mike Iraqi, who returned from retirement and is a respected leader in security with a long state career. And we have Julia Blair, who's with us virtually today, who has extensive experience as legal counsel for multiple of our C2C data providers, most recently at CSAC, and is an expert on data sharing and data privacy. We have Mary Kate Cruz-Jones, who literally wrote her thesis about public boards and has extensive experience running boards here at the state. And we've benefited tremendously from all of her hard work in preparing for today and all the work she does with you over the months. So those of us like myself who are relatively new to the state are benefiting tremendously from learning from our colleagues who bring this deep experience from within. And we're really lucky that each member of the team has been handpicked with skills tailored to their role. So again, see the resources and on board, you can get to know them better. And I hope today over the lunch break and otherwise you'll get to know the team as well. So we're excited about that. Okay, the next couple slides are going to zoom in on the analytical data. A few updates since our last meeting in May. We had some procurement and build updates. We completed a contract with the next phase system integrator. So we're now working with Deloitte, and Dan and Muni have been working successfully with that team and getting their work set up. We also completed contracts for 4 strike teams who are tailored to the C2C technology stack. So that's AWS, Snowflake, Teamer, Ping. And we're really grateful to GovOps and CDT who supported us in completing contracts before the conclusion of the fiscal year, which enabled us to make wise use of the resources that we had available. On the analytical data front, there's also been a lot of work with our data providers, and I'm incredibly grateful for the teams, your teams who've been working closely with our data infrastructure team. So we worked closely with the 9 data providers who will submit their P20W data points this fall. So that's the Department of Education, community colleges, Cal State, University of California, Student Aid Commission, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, Department of Healthcare Services, Department of Social Services, and the Employment Development Department. And so all of the file upload specifications, I believe we talked about these in May. These are the long and detailed documents that specify exactly what information will be transferred from our data partners to C2C. Those are all finalized or in final draft. And these will also provide the foundation for data dictionaries that make it easier for researchers to understand what data elements are available in the system. So we're excited about that. Next slide. This is a progress board that you've seen before. Again, I know the text is too small to read, but just want you to experience how much green is on this slide. We've done a lot of work over the summer with our data providers, so many thanks to them for being at this stage. And as a reminder, the preparatory work that you see on the left, on the white half of the progress board, is what we've been focused on. Up next is what's on the right with the orange background. So our security policies task force is going to complete its review of the most important security documents that need to have their review before we receive data. Then we'll finalize those file specifications, and then the transfer of data occurs. So this is another way of looking at the data elements. I wanted to highlight a resource that we've had available for a little while, and we'll update every time that new data points are added. And that's this data elements by provider PDF document. It's on our website on the resources page. If you're following along online, you can find it there. And it's a summary table that has little X's and columns that shows which data elements each data provider will be sharing. And I just want to unpack some of the complexity that's oversimplified in this pie chart and in the progress board before. So and really to highlight the deep work our data providers are doing. So in some cases, we have partners who are providing just a few data points. So the unemployment insurance data from EDD is a good example. There are 2 key pieces of information we're receiving from them. What were someone's earnings by quarter, and what is the industry of occupation? So in some ways you can think that's just 2 things, but those data elements are an anchor for a lot of the questions in the learning agenda that was developed during the planning process, right? Because whether someone is earning a living wage weaves into multiple dashboards that we have planned and a lot of the questions that people are very interested in. So it's just 2 data elements on that particular question, but it will anchor a lot of things. In other cases, there are many data points. So for example, CDE, our largest data provider, the breadth and depth of the CDE data elements listed in their participation agreement is vast and has required a lot of really careful consideration. Some of the elements exist in different data systems. Some have different time slices. So point in time versus cumulative versus all time. And suffice it to say, the work has been complicated, but we've had significant collaboration, and together we've drafted a solution. So we're really excited about that. And this solution will enable the data system to link the data across the systems in an actionable and meaningful way. So we're really excited about the progress that has been made, and are excited about what's possible this fall. Next slide. Timeline, this is what everyone cares about the most. And I'll just highlight again, as I mentioned last year when we were talking about timelines as well, we're not building extra buffers into our timeline. This is our expectation of what we hope to achieve with our aggressive timelines that are needed to be able to build this data system and the timelines that we have. So the rest of this month in August, our data providers will work with us to finalize this file upload specifications. And then in September, we expect our security policies task force will complete review of the system security plan, which is one of the key documents that they need to review. And that data providers will receive data dictionary drafts from us for feedback. And then October is the month where we expect to have the open period to import data for the first time. So we're very excited about that and wanted to share with you what our expected timeline is. Highlights for our practical tools. So switching gears, that was all about the analytical data set, the underlying linked data set we're building. Now talking about the practical tools for students and families. We're going to have 2 other agenda items on this. So I'm just going to touch on it briefly. For e-transcript, we've had great collaboration with the community college's chancellor's office to develop plans, worked with West Ed this summer to explore possibilities for what e-transcript could be in the future to address some of the administrative burdens and other things we discussed in May. In californiacolleges.edu, last time in May, we were excited to announce the MOU that CCGI and CDE had signed. And over the summer, the 2 entities have already been collaborating in preparation for those universal basic accounts for all 6th to 12th grade public school students. So we'll hear much more about that in agenda item 8 from Chief Deputy Superintendent Nicely. So we're excited about that as well. Next slide. New logo. So many of you are noticing the logo on the materials and your nameplates as you walked in. We're really excited about this. And I want to thank Shannon Serrato, who spearheaded this work from start to finish. I have a warm and fuzzy feeling in my heart every time I see the new logo. And we wanted a design that really conveyed that we're data driven, and the work is serious, but also feels very inviting and approachable. And most importantly, we wanted to develop this logo collaboratively. So we presented potential branding during our public community conversations. We got feedback from the public in real time and via a survey. We also engaged our community engagement advisory board. We engaged you and synthesized all of that input and iterated images based on that feedback to finalize a logo that visually communicates our work and our goals. And I'm really excited about the movement, the bar graphs, the 2 Cs, and everything that the logo is a part of. It also works quite well, both very small as an icon and large. So we're really excited about where that landed. We also workshopped our name as well to see how it was resonating with people and ensure that our mission of building more equitable futures and empowering people to reach their full potential was also communicated through that. So in our community conversations and our advisory board meetings, we asked people to share their feedback on words or phrases that came to mind when they thought about the system. And the overwhelming majority of respondents confirmed that terms like data and system resonated with them and provided clarity. So fewer people were likely to misinterpret what our organization's work is. So this official logo and our name lays the foundation for our brand. And we've also engaged a new graphic designer who will help streamline our visual identity. So much more yet to come. Demographic data. So last year, as you'll recall, we got a request for information on C2C leadership demographics as part of a larger report on the demographics of education leaders in the state. You discussed this at a prior meeting and you highlighted how it fits with our values of transparency and equity. So we reached out to you. There was a self-reported survey that you filled out. We received a 100% response rate. Thank you for doing that. And just want to note on the data, so all responses were self-reported by you as members with no predetermined categories. We can ask, next slide, please. So this year's survey asked only about race or ethnicity and gender. So you can see here on the bar graph, we have 1 decline to state, 4 Asian or Asian American, 1 Black or African American, 4 Latino, Hispanic or Mexican American, 1 multiracial, 8 white for a total of 21. Next slide. And then on gender, again, this was without predetermined categories. We had 0 reporting non-binary or transgender, 1 declined to state, 10 female, 10 male for a total of 21. And as I mentioned, this year's survey asked only about race and ethnicity and gender, but the survey also gave you an opportunity to share your thoughts about including additional information in the future about lived experiences that reflect those of Californians, such as being first generation, English learners, or socioeconomic status. So we plan to post this information on our website to provide transparency. As written in statute, our governing board is intended to reflect the cultural, racial, geographical, economic, and social diversity of California. And so we're happy to be able to share this information publicly and provide transparency about that. Next slide. Okay, with that, I'll turn it back over to you and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marianne, for that really informative update. I think reflecting on the topics that you brought up for us, it's very evident that the people that have been brought into the office, that you brought into the office, have really made a difference. We've seen this as we walked into the room. What a difference it has been, say, even from earlier this year, February or May board meeting to this board meeting, not just in how it's run, but also in the resources that are available to members. Really appreciate the work that you all have done to really make it so much easier for our members. Number one, everything that we do begins with us as individuals, the work that we do, bringing our perspectives in, all of the different resources that you have brought in, and the different the wealth of knowledge and experience, I think, really shows. So appreciate that. Thank you so much. I also just wanted to highlight that I appreciate hearing about the data system itself. I think it's really important for us to keep that focus on the work that we do here, which is to build that data system so that we can have actionable information. Right? And I also appreciate hearing about the work of the office as well as the different data providers that we hear. It is a collaborative effort, and it's so important to make sure that we're lifting up all of those voices and all of those efforts. So the file specifications that you talked about that are very close and help us build that early foundation of getting the data into the system, so important. The analytical data set as well. So thank you so much for your update. Before we move on to the next item, I'd like to hear from members if there are additional questions or comments for Marianne. None. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 5, the update, discussion, public comment, and possible action on the data and tools and community engagement advisory board slated for candidates and the selection ad hoc committee meetings. So at our May board meeting, we received an update from the governing board from member Avina Marisol, who shared with us that the selection committee had met in April to discuss the application, the rubrics for scoring, and the dissemination plan to recruit applicants for both advisory boards. Today, the governing board will make a final decision to determine which candidates will be seated on each of our advisory boards. For this agenda item, first we will receive the presentation from the chair of the committee, open it up for public comment, ask for a motion, then provide time for member comment and deliberation, and then a vote. So this process is a little bit different than what we've normally done or what we've traditionally done. We have folks on the line that would like to apply support for a candidate. We would like that to be heard prior to member deliberation. So that's the reason for that. So now let's hear from Gavin Payne, our selection committee chair, who will provide us with more specifics about the work of the committee.
Thank you, Chair Fong. And thank you for outlining the process. It's very similar to the process that we engaged in as a committee as well, hearing public comment and input prior to having deliberation on many of the applicants. So good morning, members, and thank you again. If I will just refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item and you're on board. If you're a member of the public and you'd like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. So the selection committee met on June 23rd to select 11 applicants and runners-up to fill upcoming vacancies on both the data and tools and community engagement advisory boards. As the governance manual sets forth, the committee members reviewed and scored each application based on a rubric with multiple committee members reading each application. The office itself then aggregated assessments, and at the June meeting, the committee discussed potential slates and runners-up for each advisory board based upon the top scoring candidates by committee members. So bear with me, I'm going to sort of run through and walk through a number of the committees themselves. The committee members themselves and our process. And so I just want to emphasize that it was a huge task for the committee itself, and I want to thank the committee. We had a total of 118 thoughtful and comprehensive applications submitted this year. We received more applications this year than last year, despite having only a third as many slots to fill. Made it a very tough conversation and a very tough set of choices for the committee to make. Specifically, there were 63 applications received for data and tools for 5 slots, and 54 applications received for community engagement for just 6 slots. Obviously, truly an embarrassment of riches for us and a challenge, but also I think a testament to the work that the organization is doing going forward and the interest that people have in that work. So in addition to that, the committee received over 50 letters from individuals and organizations in support of applicants, and there were 11 members of the public who provided comment at the meeting itself. The committee had many choice points to make that day. We engaged in thoughtful deliberations that led us to a final set of recommendations to make to you, ultimately selecting candidates with diverse backgrounds and expertise to fill the needs and charges of both advisory boards. Again, I really want to thank committee members for their deliberate and thoughtful preparation. I want to thank the members of the public who provided written and verbal comment. And most important, I want to thank the candidates themselves for providing such comprehensive applications, which obviously added to the complexity of our ultimate decision. And I encourage those candidates who might not have been successful to continue to pay attention and to continue to help participate with us. So can I have the next slide, please? So before we discuss the applications of the process, I want to just ground ourselves in the work that each advisory board is charged with completing. The Data and Tools Advisory Board is responsible for examining whether the data system is providing actionable information from multiple interest holders and identifying ways to improve access to that information. The Community Engagement Advisory Board is responsible for examining whether the office is creating strong feedback loops with data users, supporting evidence-based decision-making and analytical capacity, and ensuring equitable access to actionable information. So although the 2 boards may attend joint meetings and both can provide recommendations to the data system, their roles,
temas o sus funciones se puedan.
Their roles, scope of work, and scope of their recommendations to us differ. So now if we can go on to slide 28, there we go. So the current makeup of the Data and Tools Advisory Board, I'm going to handle that one first for us, consists of 8 practitioners, 3 members who represent research organizations, 2 members who represent community organizations, 2 members who represent advocacy organizations, and 1 member who represents students and families. And so the top left pie chart here on the slide is the visualization of that makeup. So per our actions last year to stagger the terms, come August, there will be 5 members cycling off this advisory board. 3 of these members are practitioners, 1 member represents a research organization, and the other member represents students and families. So the pie chart on the right side of the slide is that representation. So with the exit of those members, this will leave 5 practitioners, 2 community organization representatives, 2 advocacy organizations, and 2 research organization representatives. So the bottom left is what we'll have giving the impending vacancies, and you'll see the big white blob, which is the vacancies. So based on those impending vacancies, the office recommended that we slate 2 advocacy and community members and 3 practitioners for those 5 slots. After our public comment and member deliberation, the committee recommends, can I have the next slide, please, I think? Recommends to you for your consideration, Lisa Catanzarite, Diana Flong, Diana Harlick, Helen Norris, and Jacob Schack. Any questions? Okay, next slides. This is the Community Engagement Advisory Board recommend vacancies. So again, the current makeup of that board consists of 6 practitioners, 5 members who represent community organizations, and 5 members who represent advocacy organizations. Please look at the top left pie chart. Could we have the previous slide, I think? There we go. Come August, there will be 6 members that will be cycling off that advisory board. And with the exit of those 6 members, this will leave 4 practitioners, 3 community organization representatives, and 3 advocacy organization representatives. And so that's the bottom left pie chart again with the white blob. Currently, there's no representation related to early learning, community colleges, CSU, private or independent post-secondary institutions, or workforce development. And we had a great discussion about that, and moving forward, we'll do some additional outreach. Additionally, there are no student or tribal community voices there. So if we have the next slide, please. Based upon those impending vacancies, the office recommends slating 1 advocacy organization, 1 community organization, 2 practitioners, and 2 students. And so after our deliberations, the committee recommends to you Adam Gottlieb, Carla Lopez Valdez, Karina Lopez, Lorenzo Gamboa, Alexis Takagi, and Mike Nguyen for consideration. So in conclusion, the committee, after great deliberation, recommends the governing board move to adopt the proposed candidates and runners-up for the data and tools and the community engagement advisory boards as specified in the staff report for you. I'll turn it back now to Chair Fong.
Thank you, Gavin, for walking us through that process. It was really great to see the large number of candidates, large number of applications, I should say, that came into the process that I think with all of the considerations that you mentioned, right, trying to balance who was coming off versus who would be moving on. I think it's really important for us to take all of that into account. And I really want to thank the members of the committee for their hard work. That was a lot of applications to go through and to provide us with that slate, those 2 slates. So thank you so much. The board appreciates your time, energy, and effort in that work. So I also want to thank the members of the public that attended those meetings and provided public comments. Really important to hear the public voice in those deliberations. So thank you all for participating in that huge task. So now we'll open it up for public comment on before we take action. So I want to, if you want to comment on this agenda item, please note that the comments should be limited to the slating of the advisory board candidates. Speaker slips.
We have no speaker slips in this room at this time.
Can you check for folks on the line?
Okay, in terms of folks on the line, I see 1 member with their hand raised. If there's anybody else on the line that would like to comment at this time, please raise your hand, as we'd like to just ensure we know how many folks. Now I see 2 hands. Before we move on, just last call, anybody else on the line? Okay, I'm seeing 2 hands, and then also confirming that there is nobody at our other virtual location.
Great.
So would we like to begin?
We can begin with 2-minute public comments. Timing.
Okay, so for members on the line, I just want to remind you that since we had less than 10 members, we will allow 2-minute public comment. I will allow you to speak, and then I'll start the timer. Okay, and we'll begin with Mike, since I saw your hand first. Mike, you should be allowed to talk now.
Good morning, governing board and community members. My name is Mike Nguyen, and I'm an incoming undergraduate at UC Berkeley, intending to major in social welfare. It's such an honor to be considered for student representative on the Community Engagement Advisory Board. I've previously served as a youth commissioner of Santa Clara County, representing over 500,000 youth, educating students on health and safety, and uplifting education standards. As a first-generation student and the first in my family to seek higher education, I deeply understood the challenges of navigating the college process this past year. I would use this platform to shape the Cradle-to-Career data system, by providing insight from a youth perspective and raising awareness to equitability across every part of the process. I'm someone who assesses the atmosphere and evaluates where it could provide something. Opportunities like this don't come around a lot. I want to empower students to know that they are not alone and support is here for them. Their full potential is truly achievable. Thank you for your consideration.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Okay, we will now move to our next public commenter, who's Mayor. I will allow you to speak.
Good morning, governing board and community members. My name is Meredith Curry Nunez, pronoun she, her, with the Northern California College Promise Coalition. And just want to thank you for your consideration of the slated candidates and calling in with my support for Diana Fung with Braven and Mike Quinn, the student. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not see any other hands raised at this time. Last call for folks. And seeing no changes, we will now be closing public comment.
Thank you, Mary Kate. So I'd like to open it up for discussion and deliberation in the room here with our members. Comments? Seeing none, may I ask for a motion? Thank you, Marisol. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Mary. Mary Kate, will you take us through roll call?
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Tagorda,
Yes.
Member Josie, Member Avina,
Yes.
Member Cifuentes,
Yes.
Member Cochran,
Yes.
Member DeGear,
Yes.
Member Elo Rivera, Member Evans,
Yes.
Member Ferjueli,
Yes.
Member Hetz, alternate Mar for Member Irwin,
Yes.
Member Jez,
Yes.
alternate Reyes for Member Laird, Member Lee,
Yes.
Member Moldoff,
Yes.
Member Ohanian,
Yes.
Member Payne,
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Winkler.
Yes.
The motion passes. Oh, my apologies. Still had that public timer on.
Thank you. So that was 16 yeses. Motion passes. Welcome to our new data and tools and community engagement advisory board members. Thank you again to all who applied. If you did not get seated this year, we really hope that folks will apply again next year. Slide. We'll now move on to agenda item 6, update on teacher training and retention dashboard. Folks may recall that back in May, Member Jez requested an update on the status and scope of this dashboard. We'll now hear an update from Marianne Bates. Excellent, thank you. Excellent. So as you'll recall, we've talked about the teacher training and retention dashboard at a couple of our meetings in the past. At the last meeting, one of you requested a more detailed update in this meeting on what our plans for the dashboard are and what the visualizations and the possibilities for the dashboard are. So that's why we're providing this update. I'm happy to do that today. And please refer to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. This is agenda item number 6, if you're following along as a member of the public. All right, let's go to the next slide. So by way of background, importing and linking the P20W data points empowers our office to build data tools that make information meaningful and accessible to Californians. And during the planning process, Cradle-to-Career interest holders and data providers defined a number of planned dashboards. There are about 6 or 7 of them that are highlighted on the hyperlink that's at the bottom of this slide. If you're interested as a member of the public in learning more, you can see descriptions of all of the planned dashboards there. So among those planned dashboards, this included the teacher training and retention dashboard, which was first proposed as a pilot during the planning process. And you can look at these descriptions.
We'll also talk a bit about the planned student pathways diagram in a moment. Next slide, please. So the first dashboard that we've been tackling is the teacher training dashboard. In February of last year in 2022, you as the governing board discussed a dashboard about teacher training and retention. This was in response to a shared desire to learn more about the teaching field and to support decision makers as they build the teacher pipeline, support teachers, and encourage retention. And then last summer, in summer of 2022, our office hosted 2 task forces to refine data definitions for the dashboard together with our data providers. And over the past year, we've continued design work for this dashboard. So the current phase of the teacher dashboard will make use of the P20W data points that are being imported this fall. In particular, the dashboard is going to focus on a subset of people in teacher training programs, those who are enrolled in CSU teacher training programs, and the pathways that they take to receiving a credential. So this fall's first P20W data submission that we discussed during my update will include the new data points from CSU and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing that you voted on during your last meeting in May. And based on that, the office developed a scope and the visuals possible for the first phase of the teacher dashboard. And that's what's described in the staff memo. This will also include P20W data points from the California community colleges, from the Employment Development Department, and from the University of California. So again, those descriptions of those visuals are in the staff report, and those reflect phase 1, which leverages the data we expect to receive this fall. And then in future phases, sorry, could we go forward or go back? Thank you. In future phases, the Cradle-to-Career aims to develop a future phase of the dashboard, which would display insights from integrating data on teachers who are in K-12 schools. Thank you. Next slide. All right, more about the P20W data points. As I mentioned, in the fall, we'll import all the data points included in the P20W data set, which includes those 20 new data points added in May from CSU and CTC. And then the teacher dashboard will use credentialing data that matches to students from all higher education segments. So community colleges, UC, Cal State, and the resulting data set can then be used to visualize questions like the one in the staff report, including post-secondary education history prior to receiving a teaching credential. Then the teacher dashboard will also use credentialing, the teacher training data, credentialing data that matches to students enrolled in a CSU teacher training program. So kind of zooming in on that cohort, if you will. And the resulting data set can be used to visualize questions, again, like the ones in the staff report, for example, looking at the alignment of CSU credential program completion compared to the areas of CTC's areas of authorization, like single subject or multiple subject credentials. Next slide, please. So here's another way of showing the link to credential data, again, showing how the collaboration with our partners enables tools that increasingly demonstrate the complexity of teaching pathways. So looking at people who are awarded a credential and how that links with other information, and then looking at the people who are enrolled in the CSU teacher training programs and following their pipeline as well. Next slide. We're also already thinking about the next dashboard. So this is a separate dashboard that we're working and planning to build with the data that we received this fall. And this is what we've called the student pathways diagram, and is one of the ones that was defined in the planning process and is on that link in the website that I mentioned a few slides ago. So the second dashboard is the student pathways diagram, which we believe complements the teacher training dashboard by providing a high-level visualization of the path students take from high school to post-secondary or skills training and on to employment. And the goal of this dashboard is to clarify the educational pathways of Californians from early childhood to post-secondary education and employment. Data displayed in this dashboard will clarify differential outcomes for various student populations and foster awareness about the connection between education, employment, and living wages. So like the teacher training dashboard, the student pathway diagram will also make use of those P20W data points we're importing this fall. And in particular, the dashboard will display linked data from K-12 education, the higher education segments, and employment data. So we expect this will empower users to explore and learn about the connections between education and employment in California. Next slide. So finally, a quick update on the design work, the user-centered design work that's happening in parallel with the plans for importing the data. And I really want to thank especially Ryan Estriado and Shannon Serrato for spearheading this work. So our thoughtful and collaborative work on the data import with our data providers is intended to foster trust in the quality and transparency of the data system. And our human-centered design work is really intended to foster equitable access to this valuable information. So we're partnering with Chapter 3, they're a contractor, to design the user interface of the dashboard, the query builder, and the research request tool. So June and July were spent expanding the user research started during the planning process. And the next step is clarifying the concepts for data visualization, which will include content strategy sessions and reporting of user-centered design plans. So that's a big picture update on our dashboard work. With that, I'm happy to pass it back to Amy and answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that update. I think it's so important for us to hear the progress that's being made on this very important dashboard, these additional ways that we'll be serving our public in terms of creating access to information that they can use to take action and improve their lives. So do we have questions or comments from our members in the room?
I have a question, Chair. This is Christopher Dwelly from University of California speaking. First of all, I appreciate all the work that's been done in reshaping the focus and the sequencing of this into the different phases. I think it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. And I appreciate the acknowledgement that the entire P20 data extract is going to feed into this, and it's going to be Cradle-to-Career wide of a product instead of a pilot. One question I have is about the teacher pipeline dashboard, and I understand that we approved the specific data, the new data elements from CSU, which provide more in-depth information about the teacher training programs that students are enrolled in. And the University of California is not in possession of that data currently, not able to provide the same level of detailed data. But I'm just wondering, does the information contained in the P20 extract on field of study, although it's more generic than what CSU is providing, does that enable some illumination of the teacher pipeline from the other data providers who are not providing those additional data elements from UC and CCC? Because it could indicate if someone is enrolled in a teacher prep program, a credentialing program, an education school program, it won't provide the detail that CSU is providing. But do we have to segment everything out on the dashboard as CSU and everyone else? Can we include everyone else by way of their P through 20 data points?
Thank you for that question. So I think the way I would answer that is once we have the data this fall, I think we'll have a much better handle on what we'll be able to show and what we'll be able to visualize. So your question was essentially asking, as I understood it, can we see as much as possible from all of the higher education data, not just CSU, and see what we can illuminate for people who get a credential, even if we don't have information on the teacher preparation programs at non-CSU entities. And so our answer is we're going to try to display as much information as we can. As you mentioned, it won't be the detailed information that we're getting from CSU and the teacher preparation programs, but we're going to see what's possible. So as this dashboard was originally envisioned, it was kind of focused only on that subset of teachers who are going through the CSU teacher training programs. We definitely want to do that, and that the visuals that are described in the staff report focus on that. But once we receive the data, we also want to take a step back and do the exercise that you just described of seeing whether we're able to put together helpful visuals that draw on the UC and community colleges data as well. So happy to continue that conversation.
One of the reasons why I asked that is being represented in this dashboard, even if it's in a more limited way than the CSU trainees are, this could provide a powerful incentive for the other data providers to figure out a way to be able to collect the more detailed data that CSU is collecting and to participate in it more fully in the future.
Thank you. Really applaud your efforts in stepping forward and providing extra. And I look forward to future updates from Marianne on how we might incorporate these additional data.
I have a comment as well.
Yes.
And just to play off of what Tom Vu with AICCU, and just to play off of what Chris mentioned, that I know the nonprofit colleges and universities aren't quite providing the information just yet, still trying to work out some of those nuances, but I know we do look forward to providing, especially around this, the important information around teacher preparation. We educate 40 to 50%, depending on how you play with the information of new teachers in the state. So we do have a large stake in preparing the future teacher workforce. Yeah, we're looking forward to providing that information as well.
That sounds great. Thank you. I think I saw a hand up from, thank you. Sujin.
Sujin Jazz from California Good Pete's. I was curious if you're able to look at, I saw looking at the employment of teachers after they leave teaching. Are you able to also look at teachers' employment beyond teaching, like if they have other jobs during their teaching profession?
So what we're able to do on employment right now with the data points that we currently have approved is just looking at industry of occupation. So it's a little bit more zoomed out than what was originally mapped out in some of the pilot documents. So what we'll be able to see is essentially for people who earn a credential, in what industry are they employed? And so we'll be able to see if they're employed in the education industry, and then at a point in time, no longer employed in the education industry. We'll be able to infer some information from that, but we won't be able to see with the current information that we have, where someone is specifically employed or if they're in public education or not. So it's just, again, the 2 data points I was talking about from unemployment insurance, it just tells us the industry of occupation where someone is employed and their earnings.
If they are working in education and something that's not education simultaneously, would you be able to tell, or would this dashboard be able to tell?
I would have to look into that more. I want to make sure I look into that.
Probably unlikely, but kind of crazy. And I'm also wondering, I mean, the dashboard, a goal of it was to begin to sort of pilot and test out sort of what's it take to do this work. I'm curious, like, what have you learned that's impacting the development of the wider data system? And then particularly around adding new variables. I know that was a big part of our discussion, I think last meeting too.
Yes, so
a big question, I know, but or for next meeting perhaps.
Yeah, so I think one reflection is that the process that you used last meeting to approve the new data points from CSU and CTC so far has gone quite smoothly. Even just on the back end from thinking about the work that we're doing, we're very grateful to our partners at CSU and CTC, whose teams just blended the work of defining those data points and having the file specifications for that ready with the work we were already doing on the prior P20W data points. So that process worked smoothly, and we're expecting that those new data points can be imported this fall, just the same as the other planned P20W data points. I think a bigger reflection is that right now, this past year and a half, we've been in a moment of waiting, because we haven't yet accepted data, we haven't yet released any dashboards, and so we've received a lot of questions about, yes, the 200 data points are great and all, but what else can be done? What more data points could be added? And so I think as we release the first round of the dashboard, it will help people both see what's possible and what they can learn from it and what more they would really like to be able to see in it. So just reflecting off of the point that Chris made a minute ago on, once we have some information, there may be incentives to provide more from the UC or from other higher education entities. I think that will probably be true across the board for our dashboards. As we release information, the reaction will both be, wow, this is helpful and useful, and also, if only we could answer the following questions that would be useful too.
That iterative approach is a really good one.
I would love to sort of think about what that process then looks like, since you're anticipating that's going to be probably an ongoing question or response to the data coming out. And then, sorry, to the first thing about the EDD data, is that the industry only? Is that for the dashboard specifically, or is that a limitation of the data coming into the Cradle-to-Career data system? Or will the data system have like finer grained data on employment and earnings?
So that's the definition of the data that's coming from EDD, full stop, for the P20W data set, is that industry of occupation. That could be matched with other information from other data providers, right? So for example, if we have information on where someone is teaching in a school, that can be linked to the unemployment insurance data that later shows where someone goes. So if we have any data provider who has information on employment, that can be linked and complement the information we get from EDD. But the definition of the base wage file from EDD is this industry of occupation. Feel free to add to that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, the base wage file is limited in what it provides. And I can share those premature sharing conclusions that there was some legislation that looked to enhance what data is collected for employers for the base wage file. So that when that concludes, that may change what's available, what's the potential here. So that remains to be played out.
And that was Javier Romero.
Are any of the data providers providing data on employees, or just like, will school sites provide it on? Like, is that a thing that's going to be collected?
I don't believe we have any information on that in the current agreements.
I'm sorry, Mr. Question, was that?
No, that was
Oh.
like we could perhaps match them. This is all for that in the future.
That's right. So our higher education segments, our CDE, are providing data on their students. That's what's in the participation agreement at this time.
This is Debbie Cochran. A clarifying question I didn't realize I needed to ask until this recent discussion. Industry of occupation, when we're thinking about teachers, will the file be able to differentiate for someone who works at a school whether they are working as a teacher or as a custodian?
Yeah, I could.
Okay.
It will not.
Okay. So it's about the employer rather than the specific occupation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
David DeGare from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. I just want to commend Dan, Ryan, and their staff on this process. It's been very easy to work with them. And one thing that I've really appreciated is the way they are documenting all of the data and the changes as we go along. And it's actually forced us to look at our own data and how we are defining things to make it more user-friendly, easier for people to understand. So really appreciate the work working with them.
Thank you, David. Yes, Robert.
Chair-elect Robert Tagorda. I just wanted to uplift everyone's comments so far about this project. One, the importance of contributing data, and then also then asking these follow-up questions around what more the data can provide to us as a governing board, but also as a state to determine how we can inform policy. And I love the kinds of questions that we're already beginning to raise regarding the full capabilities of this one specific tool that we've focused on for quite some time now. I also wanted to uplift Member Jez's comment around us as a learning organization. This is one of the habits of a strong governing board that we want to continue to promote. And she's right? This is going to be our first product. We have to be learning along the way. So when David mentions, for example, that certain practices we're already beginning to put in place are behind the scenes bearing fruit in terms of helping inform other agencies perhaps, or in our collaborations, the way that we're sharing. These are all positives that are difficult to discern, but really important for us to highlight and reflect on as we move forward with this project.
Thank you, Robert. I agree. I think this is a really great conversation. It's a really great approach to see everybody well invested in the effort and willing to learn from it, right? And as we move forward to improve the products and services that Cradle-to-Career will offer. With that, I don't see any additional questions or comments. Any public comment?
There's one, yes. We'll open it up.
Thank you.
Okay. Angelica, I see your hand. I'm going to allow you to talk. All right, now there's two. There's also Raquel. I'm going to go with Angelica first.
Good morning. My name is Angelica Salazar, Senior Policy Advocate at Public Advocates. Thank you so much for this update. Last May, we sent a letter with Californians Together, Children Now, and Education Trust West to the Cradle-to-Career Advisory Board members with recommendations for including some key data in the teacher training and retention dashboard. On behalf of Public Advocates, we request that you continue collaborating with, and thank you for all the collaboration you've already done and are doing with your data providers to incorporate some of these data pieces I'm about to list for the dashboard as soon as possible. First is the educator demographic data, such as race, ethnicity, languages spoken other than English, and years of service, all of which help us understand whether our teacher population is reflective of our student subgroups. Second, misassignments by setting and course type, which would be disaggregated by school and district, which is already collected in CalSAS and helps us see where teachers are placed and where misassignments occur at an individual teacher level. And third, the California Basic Educational Data System data, which would give us a rough estimate of teacher vacancies. We're still struggling with the teacher shortage that disproportionately impacts students of color and low-income students. And these data pieces are critical for the public and policymakers to understand where lessons can be learned and interventions must be made, both in the long and short term. We appreciate your work and dedication and are excited about this longitudinal data set and the data that will provide us with actionable information about how to better support our teachers. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Angelica. Okay, we will now be moving to Raquel. I've allowed you to speak.
Thank you, Raquel Morales from the Education Trust West. We want to thank C2C staff for the continued work around transparency in the process and for the public reports. We are excited to see that the first phase will include the prioritization of 2 related dashboards as the student pathway diagram is being built. We hope to see the inclusion of complementary data that will allow for us to identify equity issues that students face during the transition points of their academic career. Additionally, we encourage C2C to consider the possibility of a unique child or student identifier. This would allow us to not just compare data across systems and draw inferences about students' experiences, but it would allow us to tangibly follow students from early childhood to workforce and clearly understand the relative impact of our education system along a student's journey and create a data system that is truly longitudinal. Thank you.
Thank you. In the time that we have public comment, we have one more hand. So I see Manuel. I will allow you to speak. You've been unmuted.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Manuel Bonrostro with Californians Together. And I'm also calling in support of the comments that our partners at Education Trust West made. We definitely appreciate the progress and work for the additional indicators. And we also support having the unique student identifier and also ensuring that as we look at data elements, ensuring that we have better information on teacher demographics and access to educators. We think these are critical components to ensure that we track how our students are progressing through high school and through college and even career, and also making sure that they have the resources that they need. Thank you again for your continued work.
Thank you. And confirming that there's no other public comment that I see at this time, nor in our other virtual location.
Thank you. Appreciate hearing some public comment on that. We'll now move on to agenda item 7. Thank you. Invitation for future updates from data providers. So if you'd like to refer to the report that's in the board materials that was drafted for this agenda item,
at our May governing board meeting, one thing that I noted was that I would like to invite our data providers to provide updates to our board members and the public about the work that they're doing to help stand up the data system. I think that having a standing agenda item will be helpful to establish a routine and really to provide space to uplift all of the work that we are doing collectively on the data system. And it will illuminate also how the state's investments are going into this work beyond the work of just the office. So my position as chair, my intention was to create this designated space and time to really uplift the work of the data providers, which will in turn, I think, strengthen all of our work together. So before we move on to this agenda item, are there any questions or comments from our members? Seeing none. On that note, I'm pleased to share that we have our first data provider update.
I'm sorry, I have one question.
Oh, yes, thank you, Chris.
I also think this is a great idea to add this as a standing agenda item. I did have a few questions about, are there any preferences, suggestions for who the presenter should be, what role they play at the data provider, what the content and format of the presentations should be?
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to uplift the things, right? And I think that it would be helpful to have the member work with the chair, Robert, at the time, to talk about, who might be most appropriate. And so I don't think it needs to be limited to the member. As in our presentation today, we'll be hearing from Chief Deputy Nicely on the work of the CDE. So,
okay.
Yeah, as far as the content of it, I think that it depends on where we are in our work plan and obviously what work the individual agencies are doing.
Yeah. Just want to make sure we hit all the points that we want to hit.
Yeah, and I'm sure that we'll have
Yeah.
Requests from other members on what they'd like to hear.
Okay.
And if helpful to say, Amy, if any members would be interested in future meetings, to reach out to the office and we can coordinate and work with y'all.
Okay.
I'm so excited. All right, on that note, we'll go ahead and introduce Chief Deputy Nicely. She is this Chief Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction at the California Department of Education, the CDE. She joined, I think it was September 2021. She's responsible for the overall operations and administration of 8 branches and implementation of key initiatives identified by the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony German. For more information about Chief Deputy Superintendent Nicely, I would like for members to refer to her bio and presentation that was shared for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the materials can be accessed from the C2C website. I'd now like to invite Chief Deputy Superintendent Mary Nicely to the podium. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I use my teacher voice. Okay, not that I'm a teacher, but I've always had a teacher-y voice. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with you today. I think this is my first governing board meeting. And I'm really excited to be able to update you on the things that we've been working on. Once again, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Chief Deputy Mary Nicely with the Department of Education. In addition to overseeing the department, I am also the deputy overseeing the Information Technology branch, a newly formed first ever branch that was actually invented for me because I love this stuff so much. The superintendent created this branch for me and really was the only reason I came to the department in the first place. And I said, I'm coming with you, but I'm only coming if I can do Cradle-to-Career. Unfortunately, now I have everyone, but that's fine. It's all good. This is where my heart is, and I'm really excited to be able to share this with you today. So this, as I said, this is the first time this branch was formed to bring together our technology services division, our ed data management division, and our analysis and reporting and measurement and accountability. So it's very exciting to be able to do this. I also served on the 18-month Cradle-to-Career working group with Deputy Sarah Neville Morgan and Director Cindy Kazanis. So, so this is kind of like, well, I can't say I've missed this because I've had a whole team working on this. But next slide. I'm not sure who I'm talking to here. Okay, so So we've been putting a lot of things in work here, in place here, and over the next, very soon, as a matter of fact, we will start transmitting a lot of information to the Cradle-to-Career. And so we've been doing a lot of work to get ourselves prepared for that. So you will be receiving 10 years worth of K-12 student level data, which is 10 million plus students worth of records, over 70 data points, over almost over 200 individual data points, as well as over 200 million elements, which would come to 2 billion, not 200 billion elements in the first transmission. I don't even know where you'd store 2 billion records. So we're giving you a break there with that. So we're very excited to be able to do that. And this information, of course, will include demographics, assessment, student assessment information, student experiences, and a lot of the different elements that we've agreed to in our data sharing and our participation agreement, which Marianne knows was something that a Herculean task, but we were able to do it. And I think I'm really hopeful that we will be successful in being able to pull all of this together and do something great for the students of California and our educators. And so next slide. So this is a representation of the data in, data flow processing, and the data reporting and outputs. I like to call this our data ecosystem that we're working on very closely to ensure that we have the right data coming in, that we have timely, high quality data. And so in the midst of this work that we're doing with C2C, we have embarked on our own very major modernization, interoperability, data governance, and data strategy initiatives to ensure that we can be a vital contributor and continue to be a vital contributor to Cradle-to-Career. So this is both internal and external facing. So it's an exciting time for us to kind of, as I call it, steer this cruise ship into the 21st century and be able to really be a major player here and be a bright spot in the Cradle-to-Career. And to be able to answer really the big questions that are facing education. And I'm really excited that we're partnering with so many of you here that are on the governing board and your leadership on a number of things, such as teacher shortages and career pathways. And I know David is like always on speed dial. It's like, dude, who do you got to help me with this? So I'm really excited to be able to have a lot of partnership with all of you to be able to collect that data and also do other major work that's important. So as you can see, this diagram is showing you that we have collected not only in CalPADS, but we work with about 2,000 LEAs on collecting data from a lot of different sources, and we're bringing some interoperability to these data sources. And we're really excited about some of the other things that I will bring up right now in the next slide. And so over the last few years, we've been doing with the funding from the state to support CalPADS some data modernization as well as improvements to our infrastructure. And so that has led to some pretty dramatic changes in how and the amount of data that we can collect now and get validated. And so at this point, we had at one point in one day this summer, and thanks to CSIS, I should never, ever forget the fact that we have an amazing partnership with CSIS, who really is on the front lines of working with our LEAs and in this ecosystem. But there was one day that we were able to process and continue to process over 25 million records in one day. And the processing is down to 3.6 minutes a file. It was 2.24 hours previously. So we have made some pretty dramatic changes and updates to our ability to process with some pretty major infrastructure changes in how we are validating. And what we hope to be able to do is get faster and be able to work even closer with our LEAs to ensure that we and our student information system vendors to ensure that we're all working together as we also work on collecting our preschool and EPK data and other data requirements that are coming from the legislature And that is part of our data strategy that we're working on to ensure that we get ahead of. So you're asking a lot of really important questions. We want to be able to get ahead of those questions and work with you all to ensure that we don't have somebody having to tell us, you should be collecting that. We should be asking those questions ourselves. What should we be collecting to ensure that we're making the best decisions to support the state and support education? So those are some, and the other thing that's very exciting is our data warehouse that has come online and is quite frankly kind of beautiful. So I'm very excited about that, to be able to see things coming together because in my former life, I was a programmer. And so I was used to data warehouses and seeing things for probably the last 15 years. And then it's kind of like, why don't we have a data warehouse? What is going on with this? And so really excited to see that and what our next steps are, because that will be where the data will all be put together for us from all these different systems we have to come out into the Cradle-to-Career. So very excited about our data warehouse and how we'll be able to transfer information to you all and to CCGI. So, you know, as we know, we have been collaborating on C2C since it started, and you know, we have our representative here, Jerry, who's on the governing board. We have representatives on the Data and Tools Advisory Board. We've been working bi-weekly with the data elements, and we have been assisting with the teacher dashboard project with bi-weekly meetings. And so at this point, you know, I think we're pretty connected at the hip. And so we're trying to ensure that we're all collaborating, we all know what we're talking about, and we know what we're collecting, because that's going to be critically important to being able to report out and get the information out to the public. So next slide. And I think you've been talking about teacher assignment monitoring, which is critical, and that we are partnering very closely with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing on. And so CDE just this year received funding, $1.3 million in 7 positions to be able to support teacher assignment monitoring outcomes. We've been doing it pretty much manually. For our first report in 2022, we don't want to have to do that, not in this day and age. So we're excited to be able to do this work, and it'll be in conjunction with our analysis, management, and reporting, accountability, AMAR, whatever that stands for, and our educator excellence and effectiveness division. So our EED, those two groups will be working together internally to be able to bring you data regarding our teachers, demographics, ratios, course enrollment, class sizes, et cetera. And so if you weren't aware, we combine the work, of course, that is coming from CTC with the information we're collecting in paths around courses and students and enrollment. So that's where we play in that, that little ecosystem as well. And then next slide. So one of the things that we're very excited about, which is right around the corner, and I know Tessa is here, is our work with CCGI and our ability to really get more of our kids the information they need and the guidance they need to actually get to college. So really excited about being able to work. And I know we're kicking off some things right now. We had a test this summer. I think we transferred over 500,000 student records to CCGI successfully. Tess can either say yes or no. I don't know.
I think it was even more than that, but
Yeah,
yes.
but we are
We're on receipt of the data.
Yes, so we're very excited about that. And so phase 1 will result in the transfer of records to over 3 million students per week from 1,200 plus LEAs. So that is going to be really fantastic for us and really an amazing step forward to support our students that would not normally get the supports they need and not just like the information they need. And so I think Tessa was one of the first people I met when I joined the working group, and she was able to explain to me why she did this. And I'm sure she's probably shared with you all before the stories of the why we all do all of this every day. So there will be some new process that we're going to need in the transcript phase of all of this. But I believe, I think I got a text message right when I was walking over that we are ready to transmit this week a bunch of more data. So be ready, Tess, for when we do that. So we're really excited about that and how we can start Next slide, how we can start promoting this work this fall with our LEAs and do some joint communications, do some marketing, and really get the information out to all the organizations that we work with students and do college prep for them, or try and get them through the door. I think it's going to be a really, it's going to be a highlight and a really good story for us to be able to tell. We're CTC. This is going to be our first big win here, and I can't think of anything quite as important on this end of the scale, right? About getting our kids, our high school kids. So that's going to be very exciting. We will roll that out in the very near future. And then next year, we will be setting up all of the student accounts for all the students. So right now, we'll be working on a little smaller scale until we are ready to transmit all of our students over and ready to look at how we deal with transcripts. So next slide is all of the public facing data we already have that is available for publicly available for people to download and do reporting on, which we see a lot of. And these are where there are already millions and millions of data points available for work that this will eventually come into the things that we report on and work on with CTC. And so lastly, in order to support all of these, I think the last slide here is really, once again, just how and who we'll be working with and partnering with to be able to make sure that we are getting in the data that we need. And once again, that it's high quality, it's timely, and it is the actual data we need to support the Cradle-to-Career system. So, open to any questions you might have, and then we have Jerry here. I think we have one more person in the room. I'm not sure. I walked over doing that. Oh. So in case somebody else has to answer some questions, but open to any questions you might have.
Hi, Susan for California Feeds. Can you talk more about the CCGI and CDE? Does this mean that CDE will provide the data for CCGI, or districts still signing on?
So
CDE have transferable data and just.
So CCGI will be the provider of the service and the counseling, and Tess, jump in whenever you can, if you ever feel like it. So we'll be providing the information to create the student accounts, right? And so then we also have all the course information that, I mean, it's kind of going in and then back out, right? So there's a process here of that data that's going to be, but we'll be the ones that will supply the actual information for the data, the student accounts. And so then there'll be information kind of coming back and forth between us. And so that, but people I think will be able to opt out. Help me with that, Tess. I don't think anybody's going to opt out, but the information from us as to who the students actually are and their course data. Eventually, when we get to the transcript phase, we'll be able to kind of like look at how that's going to be. But we have all their, because all their courses come in, right? So we have the course data, and to have to work with, I can see CSU and UC, right, to the A to G requirements as well.
So you won't need the districts to like sign on with CCGI too.
Yeah, so that will be part of it, but it'll be free, and it'll be, so it's not going to be, we'll be helping with all the marketing so everyone knows. It's like, here, this is the state giving you this resource to be able to work with, so sign on, and then CCGI will start doing the counseling and working and training with the LEAs to move forward, to support their students.
I think that's so great. I feel like in my personal mom experience with my home district, which has not signed on, which I'm trying to get to, I see that district is just really strapped and, financially and capacity wise to be able to log in and to join on to CCGI. So I think as much as the state and CDE can do to support that because they want to, I think it really will help address equity issues in our state for students to have access to this really important tool.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so that's why we're really excited about this, to be kind of our first kind of out the door, to be able to have something like this that is so impactful, and it'll be impactful like right away.
So I have a quick question just from my head. The 2 billion data elements in the first transmission. I'm really excited about the teacher information. Is that part of that, or is that just student information?
Sharon,
It is part of them.
Yeah, it should be.
So that 2 billion information, that 2 billion elements in the first big tranche of data will include the teacher information from the slide that you had.
Correct.
That's huge.
It's actually closer to 3+. We were trying to be conservative.
Well, they had 200 billion, but that was kind of like, yeah, that's probably pushing it a little bit. So let's go with 2 billion.
So I'm okay with 2 or 3, that's
Yeah.
fine.
If I can clarify the answer, the data elements that are going to be provided are going to be directly associated as listed in the participation agreement. So if the board member was asking regarding teacher demographic information, that's not going to be included in the first tranche of data that's being provided later this summer or earlier this fall. I can't remember where October falls in, if it's summer or fall. I think it's fall.
Not the demographic, but the teacher data attached to the courses.
That there will be course data that will be included. I can't say with 100% certainty that the teacher associated with each of the courses is going to be included in this particular data set. The course data is being included as specified in the P20W.
Got it.
Thanks, Renzo.
Renzo, would you mind stating your name for the folks that are remote?
I'm Renzo Bernalis. I work at the California Department of Education.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renzo.
Nathan Evans from the California State University System. And while a new voice and member of this group, a longtime supporter and advocate for CCGI, I want to absolutely amplify member Jen's comment. The move to a universal creation of accounts has been one, or just the creation of accounts and onboarding of districts has been, I think, one of the greatest challenges in this journey. And so I'm so appreciative of the work of TDE in really breaking down this barrier. This is truly has been a barrier to equity and bringing more districts on board. So I just so appreciate the work and collaboration.
We're excited.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely. Do we have other, yes, you do.
Sorry. So the 10 years of student records is news to me, and I think that's really amazing. Will that also apply to CCGI? And I'm thinking about maybe one day, I know I bring this up, I feel like this all the time. I think if we could have that goal, because there are 6.8 million Californians, adults without a college degree, for whom being able to ease application to higher ed would be really powerful, because as you could imagine, going back to get your transcripts to apply is really challenging, or can be really challenging. So I would love to encourage that as that data is getting uploaded, if there is a way in the future that it's possible, or that we just continue those students' records as they get older too.
Can I address that briefly? Yeah, so Tessa DeRoy, CCGI, we are retaining student records beyond the point of high school graduation, so that over time, we are actually gathering those records to be able to serve students that are multiple years out from high school graduation. So we're on it, in motion.
A question. Thank you for this presentation. The diagram that shows all the different components supporting Cradle-to-Career mentions the National Student Clearinghouse as an input into the K through 12 student data. Is that post-secondary data?
I don't believe so. But I don't know. You tell me. All I know is I signed the contract to pay for it, and it got really expensive this year. That's all I have to say.
That's why I was asking.
It was like, wow, that went up by $200,000.
Okay, that's exactly why I was asking.
Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, the National Student Clearinghouse basically lists where students go after high school. And we can trace them outside of California. So it makes it much easier to find out where they went.
So is that an input into Cradle-to-Career somehow, into what you're
I don't
submitting?
know if it is yet. I think these are things that we're going to be looking at, but I don't believe it's in our participation agreement.
And given the significant cost of obtaining that, is that something that would need to continue if we have the student pathways dashboard and Cradle-to-Career is pulling together all of the different movement between at least California schools?
So I'm happy to speak to that. So we're actually in conversation with not only with CDE, but with multiple other data providers about the hope of having a collective agreement with the National Student Clearinghouse in a way that could make more efficient use of taxpayer dollars. and have the information available to not only for our purposes for the dashboards, but also for our partners who use it in a variety of mechanisms. So that's a conversation that's ongoing. I'll mention later today as well, this is relevant for AICCU members too.
Because I guess to that point, are the UC, CSU, and AICCU collecting where their students are, where they're coming from? And are you getting to the point where if we have this, you don't need that?
Yeah, and in fact, Nathan might remember this, but in a previous iteration before we had Cradle-to-Career, when the segments were getting together to talk about how we can share data and build dashboards that show the education pipeline. At the time, I think CDE was first acquiring National Student Clearinghouse data to build what I think became the college pathways data tool or something. I think I recall something like that on the CDE website that was great, but it came at great expense and cost in obtaining the clearinghouse data. And at the time, the folks who were working with at CDE was really advocating for Cradle-to-Career's first product to be something that could obviate the need for CDE to do that. And I think the student pathways dashboard that you mentioned really syncs up well with that. And it seemed like it was kind of coming full circle back to those conversations we had several years ago before we had Cradle-to-Career.
We'll check that. I'll check in and see what we might have, but I know that I don't think we purchased it last year or something. And so then or maybe we did, but it was just a huge, I think it was over $500,000 this last year.
We all like to find ways to save costs, right?
Yeah,
Right.
well, there's that, and there's duplication of effort,
Mhm.
and there's potentially conflicting and information out there on the same topic. And, it's best to have one sort of source of truth on these kind of things if you can.
All right, I understand we have a comment from Catalina, from member Cifuentes. Catalina, are you there?
I am, thank you. Great to see everyone. I wish I was there in person. Hopefully I get to see you in person in November, and just want to say a huge thank you to Nathan Evans. I think excited, congratulations, but also excited because as part of this has been what you've been working on for years. So I just want to say thank you. We wouldn't be here without you. So I want to just question, and my question, Marion, it's so great to see you, and I can't see everyone on the CDE team. I just have a question, and it's like a long range question or consideration, but I think it's important to understand the power of what you're doing and what CDE's embarking on and joining on. Right now, August 25th is the deadline for our school districts, our LEAs in the state, to certify, finalize their end of year data. One of those being A through G completion rates for their students for class of 23. What we're able to do, with California colleges is really predictively see how many students not only are on track by grade level, but that completion conversation. Well, right now our school districts are pretty much self-reporting their A through G completion rates by students, by graduates. And this is an opportunity as we move forward to actually get verified numbers of how many students are actually completers or on track to really do strategic planning. I think especially for our UC and CSU campuses around enrollment, like where do we see the enrollment? Where's the A through G increasing? So I guess my question for you, for Mary, is to see are we having conversations or what about how we can start using this data to even look at A through G completers and slowly moving away from that self-reporting piece that we do now in CalPADS?
I will tell you in all honesty, we have not gotten to these conversations yet. We're just trying to get the data out and clean and validated and make sure we have all the data that we need in place. So I think that's a good question. I've not had those conversations. I don't know Jerry or Renzo or Tess, we've gotten to that place yet. These are not conversations that I have. Like I personally haven't.
It's a great conversation. That we need to have, and we're just getting, like Mary said, we're just getting the data together in a timely fashion. So
Yeah, I can add to that's part of the phase 2 work with CCGI to build data systems to collect transcript level data, which is transactional data, which is very different from our data collections through CalPADS and other existing means. And the hope is through that phase 2 work that we'll develop a much richer collection system that will lead to data that will then be transferred to CCGI that will be used for that transcript verification function. And once that happens, then we should have more data of the type that Board Member Cifuentes has mentioned. But this is upcoming and in the thinking phase, for lack of a better term.
All right, once again, that was Rento Bernales from the CDE.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I just think that the power of that to actually have verified and predictive analytics on where the region is, if we look at campuses that are, looking at enrollment increases, you can actually query out and do that. And so the platform's been able to help us really address the CalPADS end of the year data. So it's no longer person dependent or an administrator or a school counselor. It's a way to get actual verified A through G completers. So I think that's great if you're doing that. Any help we can provide for some of our districts have been using it a while to cross-reference their CalPADS, we can offer that as well. So thank you so much. And this is super exciting.
Thank you. Do we have additional public comment?
I see one hand raised. If there's any other folks on the line that would like to raise their hand, please do so at this time. I'll give you another moment. Seeing one, Raquel, I'll allow you to talk now.
Thank you, Raquel Morales from the Education Trust West. We appreciate the overview provided today by CDE's data projects, product and workflows, and the department's collaboration with and contributions to the Cradle-to-Career. Partnership of this kind is critical to if the C2C's vision of a comprehensive and robust longitudinal data system is to be realized and sustained in the long term. Having advocated for funding to be appropriated in this year's budget for critical investments in CDE's data capacity and infrastructure, we at the Education Trust West are thrilled to see the planned improvements of list of data products CDE plans to create using resources provided by AB 102, Section 109. We are especially pleased to see planned resumptions of reporting on teacher demographics. These data are vital to understanding equity gaps and access to teachers who reflect the diversity of our students. Planned reports on the teacher turnover and retention, as well as class size ratios, will also provide information about equity gaps to be addressed and bright spots to learn from and uplift. We hope the agency is able to execute on creating and publishing each of these data sets in a timely manner and look forward to having these data publicly available in an accessible way. Finally, in the interest of helping users to connect the data dots, all of these new data sets and products come online. We also encourage continued collaboration to ensure that data sets like the teacher assignment monitoring outcome data is also linked to C2C. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any more hands at this time, we can close public comment.
Thank you so much, Mary, for coming and joining us today. It was a really informative presentation and great conversation around the table on that.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
I'm so happy we have a data provider to take this whole thing. All right, we will now move on to agenda item 9, update, discussion, public comment, and possible action on the strategic plan and strategic planning ad hoc committee meetings. So at our May board meeting, we received an update from Robert, who shared with us that the strategic planning committee had met twice, and during the sessions, 4 main work streams were defined. So we had the analytical data, engagement, operations, and the practical tools, and the committee concentrated on the problems that needed to be solved within each work stream. So from there, the committee began working on objectives, short-term quantifiable results that would show progress over time. So today, the governing board will make a decision to adopt the strategic plan as was developed by the committee. Now we'll have Mark on the progress.
Thank you very much, Chair Fong, and for governing board members, members of the public, I'd like to direct your attention to the staff report that was drafted in conjunction with this agenda item number 9, as well as the strategic plan draft that's posted on the board's website. To summarize, the committee was put in place to meet the requirement of Education Code 10866D, which directs Cradle-to-Career to adopt an annual strategic plan and review and revise that plan as needed. So as Chair Fong alluded to, the committee met 3 times to develop the strategic plan that's before the governing board for approval today. The work is divided into 4 main work streams, and the committee defined the problem statement, the goal, and SMART objectives in each area. We made a point specifically of incorporating requirements from statute, current priorities of the office, ideas from our stakeholders and other sources. So I'm going to walk through the 4 areas of the strategic plan in the ensuing slides. Operations first, then analytical data, practical tools, and engagement. I'm going to highlight some of the main areas of focus, drawing upon either other agenda items that may come before the board today or other discussions that we've had over the past few months. But before we do so, I'd like to take this moment to thank my colleagues, Catalina Cifuentes, Amy Fong, Jessica Moldoff, Gavin Payne, Javier Romero, and Tom Vu for their leadership in the committee. So this is a collective work that's being presented to you this morning. Next slide, please. So here's the operations section. As the statement of the problem articulates, prior to C2C, there was no centralized neutral state entity to bring the data together and remove existing barriers to ensure the integration of the data. So the goal in operations is to ensure that the office is established and implementing secure and effective procedures to maintain the trust of collaborators and the public. Next slide. There are a total of 9 objectives laid out in operations, and there's one I'd like to focus on related to the governing board's governance culture. The idea for this objective came from the presentation that Leading Resources Incorporated gave to the governing board last February. The conversation focused on 5 habits to assure high levels of performance throughout the organization. Habit 4 centers around the board developing itself so that it can effectively serve the organization's needs. So this objective was developed thinking about how the governing board can implement the 5 habits with a specific emphasis on habit 4, participate in the strategic plan and further the mission, vision, and goals of C2C. Additionally, I'd also like to commend the office for completing the objective of filing the established positions for the office. We heard that in the executive director report this morning and can see it in full flash here in our meeting room. It's amazing to see how the office has grown immensely in 6 months. Okay, next slide. Analytical data. As this particular statement of the problem mentions, important state agency data are kept separate, making it difficult to inform data-driven decision-making. The goal for the work is to build a linked analytical data set that connects data on education and job outcomes in order to help answer important questions. Next slide. Here we have 5 objectives for analytical data, and the one I'd like to focus on is the launch of a priority topic dashboard in the upcoming spring. The office is well positioned to get this in place, which is an important step in making the information in the P20W data set available to the public. We just heard a presentation that kind of elucidates this particular objective as well. Another objective in this section is the first submission of data from data providers this fall, which obviously enables the creation of tools that will go before the public. And here I'd like to echo Marianne Bates and Chair Fong from earlier today and recognize the hard work of our data partners with a standing agenda item that we're going to put before the governing board. It's going to help us to continue to keep an eye on the objectives of this analytical data section. Okay, next slide to practical tools. We all recognize students face confusing barriers when applying for college and financial aid, which can exacerbate existing disparities We might remember the presentation that we received at our May governing board meeting on administrative burden. And the students that joined us and cemented this problem through their personal stories related to the difficulties of navigating higher education due to these barriers. The goal in practical tools is to reduce these barriers by linking real-time information across institutions and communicating about these options to students. I'm also reminded of the public testimony from one of our new incoming student advisory board members who talked about this being a lived experience that he's happy to share with our advisory board. Next slide, please. So the practical tools section contains a total of 3 objectives. One that's worthy of being highlighted relates to e-transcript, as this is something that the board will hear more about later today in agenda item number 16. The work of this objective, as well as the objective to promote californiacolleges.edu as a one-stop shop for launching financial aid applications and applying to colleges and universities, it very closely relates to the concerns heard in the administrative burden presentation. And then lastly, next slide on our engagement, statement of the problem and goal, and then I'll talk a little bit about the objectives within this section in the next slide. But this one focuses on how communities lack equitable access to information and data. So the goal for us here is to engage with communities to listen and identify information needs and connect this to the work of C2C. Next slide, please. So one of the 6 objectives in this section is to ensure that the information is trusted and useful, and the prioritization of transparency and communications. It'll be a crucial piece towards achieving the goal. It's going to take some time for us, obviously, to build trust in communities, and the office continues to do a wonderful job interfacing with the public in a transparent way to continue to build and develop that trust. And I think the number of applications that we received for our advisory board speaks to that outreach that I think our office has been doing. An additional objective here is the development of the brand identity. We saw an image of the logo from earlier today. I want to congratulate the office on the launch of that new logo and the branding. The thought process that went into that, I think, is illustrative of the kind of rigorous engagement with which we want to outreach to our communities. Okay, in summary, in the next slide, I'd like to share that the committee recommends the governing board's move to approve the goal and objectives for analytical data, engagement, operations, and practical tools specified in the staff report and reflected in our strategic plan. And I'll pass it back to Chair Fong.
Thank you, Robert, for walking us through the main elements of the strategic plan. I really appreciate the thought and the intentionality that went into thinking through these 4 work streams and looking at SMART goals, SMART objectives. What are the things that we're looking forward to accomplishing in the near term? So really appreciate the work that went into the overall strategic plan. So I'd like to open it up now for member comment and question.
I'll comment. This is Board Member Meredith Lee. I really appreciate, having not served on this committee, the organization and the thought that went into the 4 work streams. I really appreciate the problem or challenge statement, just putting a draft out there, and several of the objectives. I will say it does seem ambitious, and so I'm glad that we are, like how we're not building in buffer for the timelines, aiming big here. And I'm curious how moving forward, we can all support each other to hold ourselves accountable to those timelines, where many of them are actually summer 2023, which is arguably almost done now. So, but overall, definitely really appreciate the thought that clearly went into the document.
No comment from Kelly.
All right. Thanks, CJ.
For the I really like this. For the practical tools, the statement of the problem and in the goal, I wanted to flag that. I hope that we think about financial aid not just being what CSAC provides, but also, as I sit next to John, like the other resources and support that our state can offer our students as they, pursue their educations. So we think broadly about financial aid as sort of all the programs and services that can make college more affordable for students.
Comment and a question. I also think this is great work, and I really appreciate how it starts with the mission, the mission and the vision statements, and follows from there and builds on those to provide a detailed roadmap, and also how it connects to the work plan, which we're going to talk about later. So we have a full framework of how to move forward, which I think is great. I do have a question in the operations section. Can you talk a little bit about more what we mean by a focus on ambassadorship and with the progress summaries, how they will support that?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, what we saw presented with CDE is illustrative of this particular objective. We want to see more of the kind of sharing that's going to enable us to keep on top of the timelines.
Okay.
Be able to understand the contributions of, specifically in this case, some of our data providers, but also in terms of the behind the scenes work that we know doesn't get talked about enough during our public meetings, but we know occurs as well, which is that each of our governing boards, particularly those who work with data providers, have to work internally within their own institutions to ensure that it gets done. And I think we wanted to acknowledge that as an important priority and as an important element of the contributions that our governing board members make.
Great.
Question, yeah, Debbie Cochran. I think this is great work and great articulation of the problems and the goals and the very clear measurable objectives both for the year and beyond. And I'm wondering if the committee spoke or thought at all about, I'm just pulling up the statutory language. And I, really triggered by the language asking for an annual strategic plan, which is a strange time frame, right? A strategic plan normally spans multiple years with measurable goals along the way. It seems like that's actually what we are looking at, right? These are not 1 year goals. It also looks like this is something that the governing board may be involved with, but does not need to do in terms of an annual strategic plan. I guess I'm curious how the committee has thought about or talked about an annual strategic plan process and what we can do through this process to be helpful, because an annual strategic plan does not seem helpful in the slightest. It feels like too much process, not enough time to set big goals.
Yeah.
And again, what's here are big goals. They seem like the right goals. It just feels a little out of step with the statutory language.
It was discussed as well, and I'll let our executive director discuss this as well. It was a topic of discussion by the ad hoc committee to ensure that the time frame is appropriate for us to be ambitious, while also recognizing candidly we have a work plan, an annual work plan that allows us to break down a broader strategic plan into more manageable chunks. And the way that we've approached it, as you can see, is it's multiple years. But the process of revisiting it, I think, is a good organizational habit for us to take, and would also fulfill the needs of the statute. So that we can look at it and see what is the progress that we're making towards our strategic plan, and then revise it as necessary in terms of, whether circumstances are changing that might precipitate a need to revisit some of our objectives or goals. But that's sort of how we approached it, to marry what is in statute with what we believe is going to be a best practice for us organizationally.
That's exactly what I also intended to share. So your approval of our annual work plan combined with this multi-year strategic plan that you can revisit each year if you wish to, is how we were interpreting addressing the issue in statute.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no additional discussion from members in the room, just checking this. All right, so we'll go ahead and ask for a motion. Motion to approve the goal and objectives for the analytical data, engagement operations, and practical tools. Strategic plan specified in this.
So moved.
Thank you, Chris. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Meredith. So before we vote, we'd like to go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Okay, for folks on the line that would like to comment on this item, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you. I do want to clarify that at this time, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'll give you another moment. Seeing no change in status, we can close public comment, and we have none in our virtual location as well.
Thank you, Mary Kate. We can move to this roll call vote.
Okay. Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Tagorda,
Yes.
Member Josie, Member Avina,
Yes.
Member Cifuentes,
Yes.
Member Cochran,
Yes.
Member DeGear,
Yes.
Member Ella Rivera, Member Evans,
Yes.
Member Frigielli,
Yes.
Member Hetz, alternate Mar, excuse me, for Jackie Irwin.
Yes.
Member Jazz,
Yes.
alternate Reyes for Member Laird, Member Lee,
Yes.
Member Moldoff,
Yes.
Member Ohanian,
Yes.
Member Payne,
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Winkler.
Yes.
We have 17 ayes.
Motion passes with 17 ayes. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. That gets us to our lunch break. Let's go ahead and recess for lunch for 30 minutes. Actually, let's go ahead and make it 12:15. So we'll see you back at 12:15. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back from the lunch break. Coming back from lunch, I think it's appropriate to reestablish quorum. Mary Kate, would you do roll call for us?
Member Fong,
Here.
Member Tagorda,
Here.
Member Josie, Member Avina, here, Member Cifuentes, Member Cochran,
Here.
Member DeGear,
Here.
Member Ella Rivera, Member Evans,
Here.
Member Frigielli, Member Hetz, alternate Mar for Member Irwin, Member Jez,
Here.
alternate Reyes for Member Laird, Member Lee,
Here.
Member Moldoff,
Here.
Member Ohanian,
Here.
Member Payne,
Yep.
Member Romero,
Here.
Member Vu,
Here.
Member Winkler,
Here.
and I'm going to circle back to Member Frigielli.
Here.
Have a
Thank
quorum.
you. Great, with that quorum, so we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 10. Thank you. Discussion, public comment, and possible action on the Cradle-to-Career 12-month work plan. Governance manual states that we will have a work plan that will be developed for approval by the governing board. So Marianne Bates will provide us with that next presentation.
Thank you. So the 12-month work plan, I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. This is agenda item 10. If you're a member of the public who's just dialing back in and you'd like to follow along, this is posted on our website on the event page for today as agenda item 10. I recommend you follow along in your digital or hard copy. The text is small and we won't be able to see it on the slides well, but hopefully it feels familiar. You reviewed and approved a similar plan last year. And as we just discussed in the last item, our annual work plan is modeled after the strategic plan that you just approved and voted on. So that's how it's organized, and you'll see that. Before we dive into the annual work plan, I want to highlight that the first 2 pages of that attachment A and the staff report for this item is an updated 5-year timeline. Much of what was in the 5-year timeline for last year is still in this timeline. We've added more detail and also a new category for you as a board. So I'm just going to highlight a few things in the 5-year timeline before we dive into the work plan. And especially the kinds of things that we've gotten the most questions about from members of the public and people who are interested in our work. So we've already, on the operations side, I already mentioned this morning our plan to move to new space that will be really inclusive and welcoming for our events. Let's zoom in on the analytical data row. That's the second row on the first page of attachment A. As I discussed in my ED update, a couple of the items that relate to accepting data from our data providers and producing our first dashboard that had been scheduled for year 2 have now moved to year 3. And believe it or not, we are in year 3 of the data system, which the clock started when the legislation passed. So you can see the first 2 bullet points in that row are about data providers submitting the data. The other pieces in this row that we've gotten the most questions about is when the data set will be expanded to include additional data points. So we talked about that this morning in the context of the teacher dashboard, and I just want to highlight those. So in year 3, you can see there's a bullet point for expanding teacher credentialing analytical data set. And many thanks to the commission, we're on track with the new data points that you voted on in May for that. And then the next bullet point on expanding the analytical data set to include independent colleges. We've been having great conversations with AICCU about the potential for getting as many data points as possible via the National Student Clearinghouse for the independent colleges. And that's important because unlike the system, the other higher education systems, which already collect data and then can transmit it to us, there's no equivalent for the independents where that data is already collected. And it would be incredibly challenging, if not infeasible, for us to sign data sharing agreements individually with each college and all of the complexities that go along with that. So our path to success there, we're having conversations with the National Student Clearinghouse, and that's one of the components of a potential partnership with them. If you look at year 4, just highlighting a few other things. Year 4 highlights expanding analytical data set to include private colleges. So that would be data from our partners at BPPE, as well as early learning and care. So many thanks to John Ohanian. We're in great conversations with the folks at DSS who are setting up the ESIDS, the early childhood information systems there, and having conversations now about our tech stack and their tech stack so that as they build their data system, it can be well positioned to link in with ours. And then in year 5, there's a broad bullet point about expanding the data set to include social services, health, and workforce information. So there's an opportunity for you as a board to think about the long-term trajectory of what would be possible for the data system. If you turn to the next page in the 5-year timeline, you can see that the next sections are about our practical tools. I'll highlight again that we have a bullet point there for this year on creating that roadmap for e-transcript. We're going to talk about that more later this afternoon. So I'll just highlight that. And then the rest of the items on engagement, we've discussed in other contexts. And the piece on boards is largely about the cadence of your work. So I'm not going to go into any more detail there, but we'll just pause to see if there are any questions about the 5-year timeline before I dive into the 12-month work plan. Okay. So with that, if we can go backwards to the beginning of the 12-month work plan slides. Thank you. So if you're looking now at the 12-month work plan, there should be a full page that is in purple. And that's the first page of the 12-month work plan as it focuses on operations. As you look at this, including for those of us, for folks who are dialing in online, there's a small icon that looks like a magnifying glass that shows up. That's you applying your magnifying glass to our work through your board review. So when you see a cell that has that icon on it, it means it's something that comes to you in a formal way, usually for your review and your vote. So as you look at the annual, the fiscal year, we've just started, right? This is the fiscal year that we're currently in. You can see on the operations side, there are 3 board review icons: the strategic plan, you just did that, the annual work plan, and next up, the budget change concept. So when you're looking at that, look for that icon, that's your clue there. The one piece I wanted to highlight on this page, I actually already did in my ED update, so I won't spend more time on that. Next page, you're looking for the blue page now, which is analytical data. We've talked about some of this already. I want to highlight that we expect the first data submissions this fall. As I described in my update this morning, the scheduled time for that is the month of October. That's our first run on receiving the data and linking it together. After that, the cadence that we work through and agreed with our data providers is to have March be the timeline for annual submissions. So that was the month that our data providers agreed would be a good time that enables them to have validated the prior year's data and have it be ready for submission to us. I want to highlight that because as you get questions about our analytical data, I think it's important to be transparent and honest with the public that this linked analytical data set is not real-time data, right? It by definition is going to be half a year old by the time we get it, and then it's going to take us some time to link it and be able to update dashboards and make it available. So it's incredibly useful for analytical purposes and retrospectively looking at things, but I just wanted to highlight that March cadence of data submission means the data will be annually updated, but it's not nightly, it's not weekly real-time data that's going back and forth. In contrast to what our practical tools can do with the much more frequent data exchanges that, for example, California Colleges.edu has. So just wanted to highlight that. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to in this page on analytical data is the focus on data security and data privacy. Incredibly grateful to all of you whose team members are on our security policies task force. We've met periodically over the last 6 months and have really appreciated the engagement from your chief information security officers and other colleagues who are helping us ensure that we're building the data system in as secure a way as possible. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the focus on user-centered design. We're literally required by statute to have a focus on the end user and to use a user-centered design approach, and we're doing our best to build that in from the start. All right, next we can turn to the practical tools page. This is in green. And I want to highlight the top 3 rows of this page is the work that our office is doing directly. And there's 3 main areas. So that student experience audit, incredibly important for keeping us grounded in the experiences of students and hearing directly from them. And then you can see the work that we're planning with California Colleges.edu and communications campaigns and highlighting the needs to scale that platform. And then the work that we've been talking about with eTranscript California to work with a task force this fall and continue that work with our higher education segments, especially, as well as CDE in our collaborations to develop this work on the transcript front. The second half of the page below that lighter bar you see across highlights the work that CCGI is doing with each of the relevant data partners and what they have together mapped out for the next fiscal year. All right, if you turn the page again, we're now on orange, and this is the engagement page. What I'd like to highlight here is that the work is not only about getting our message and our brand and our story out, but really starting with listening to and learning from our communities. And so you'll see a lot of the work we've already been doing strengthened here. So continuing things like our community conversations, really leaning on our advisory boards, especially our community engagement advisory boards, to make sure we're learning from as many communities and people as we can to ensure that what we build is actually useful for them. And equally important is telling our story and ensuring that people can see themselves in this work, realize how it's relevant to them, what kinds of questions they'll be able to answer, how it can improve lives for young people and open opportunity. So this is the big picture. I will highlight, we're planning to relaunch the website. Shannon is working with some great contractors that I believe we discussed last time in May with Tena. So we're very excited for that. The difficulty in navigating our current website is a known issue. I just want to acknowledge that, and we're very excited about the work she is leading our team through to be able to have an entirely brand new website that will be launching this fiscal year. All right, and then the final page is new. Last year, we merged your work into the other 4 pages of the annual work plan, and we thought it'd be helpful to just create a separate page that helps you see the cadence annually of the kinds of things that you do. So for example, you can see at the top, this meeting, the first meeting of the fiscal year is when you elect and onboard a new chair-elect. You can see the cadence of different committees. You can see the cadence of the advisory board process, both appointing new members, which you did this morning, and then also the process of their recommendations. So the advisory boards will be providing and discussing recommendations this fall. Then we do our feasibility studies with data partners, and then those would come to you next spring. So this page gives you a big picture overview of some of the main areas of your work. Okay, with that, I think I'm ready to pause and see if there are any questions. Back to you.
Thank you, Marianne. I really appreciate seeing the work plan as it was laid out with a 5-year overview, and then the detailed look at the annual plan, which includes the pieces from the strategic plan where we would talk about the goals and the problem and then the objectives. So that's really helpful to see. We have questions from board members for Marianne. Yes, Robert.
Robert Tagorda, Chair-elect. I just wanted to commend the team once again for putting this together, especially in alignment with our strategic plan. And I like the visual representation of what the board works on. Obviously, it's the most resonant for us as governing board members, but to be able to see the cycle of our work through a given fiscal year, I think is very valuable and allows us to continue to build our institutional practices. So this is a great tie-in as well to our governance manual work. So it's really beginning to come together. The work that we put into our governance manual, our strategic planning, the work around onboarding new members, the work around the 5 habits. These are all good for us in terms of organizational practices.
No, not seeing other hand raised.
All right, seeing no other comment or question coming from our board members, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the 23-24 annual work plan as presented. Thank you, David. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Nathan. Before we go into vote, let's go ahead and take a look at public comment. Public comment.
If there's anybody on the line that would like to make a comment at this time, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands at this time, but I'll give you another moment to do so. Seeing no hands raised and not seeing any other public comment in our virtual location or here in Sacramento, we can close public comment.
Okay, thank you. And once again, this was a motion to approve the annual work plan. Okay, will you take us through the roll call vote?
Sure. Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes.
Yes.
Member Cochran.
Yes.
Member DeGear.
Yes.
Member Ella Rivera. Member Evans.
Yes.
Member Ferjueli.
Yes.
Member Hetz. Alternate Mar for Member Irwin.
Yes.
Member Jazz.
Yes.
Alternate Reyes for Member Laird.
Yes.
Member Lee.
Yes.
Member Moldov.
Yes.
Member Ohanian.
Yes.
Member Payne,
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
and Member Winkler.
Yes.
Okay, that is 18 ayes.
18 yeses means the motion passes. Thank you so much. All right, as we transition now from the discussion of the 12-month work plan and what actions the office will take to advance our goals and objectives, we're going to move into discussion about the support through the budget process, making sure that the office has the necessary resources to support all of these actions. So we'll move to agenda item 11, which is the update discussion, public comment, and possible action on the budget change concept. And Leslie Taylor here from Leslie Taylor from the office is the Director of Operations, who will present this next item.
Thank you, Chair Fong. I'm guessing better with just the ceiling mics. I hope you can hear me online. Leslie Taylor, Director of Operations for the office. In this item, I'll provide a high-level overview of the state budget process and review the budget change concept the office is proposing for fiscal year 24-25. So I refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. As with the other items, members of the public that would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. Next slide, please. So the state fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th. So today we're still very early on in fiscal year 23-24. This is the time of year when agencies and departments review their baseline funding to determine whether additional resources are needed for next fiscal year, beginning July 1, 2024. The initial request for resources is a budget change concept. This month, agencies will work with departments to prioritize budget change concepts and develop the initial ideas into budget change proposals. Those will go to the Department of Finance in September for consideration in the governor's proposed budget, which is released January 10th on or about. In the months that follow, the legislature will hold budget hearings where departments will present their budget change proposals and answer questions from members. And by June 15th, the legislature will pass the budget bill. So to apply that timeline to C2C's BCP for fiscal year 23-24, last August at this meeting, the board approved a draft budget change concept. Then the office worked with the Government Operations Agency and the board chairs to prepare and submit a budget change proposal to the Department of Finance. That BCP was included in the governor's proposed budget, and Executive Director Bates testified at Senate and Assembly budget subcommittees in March and April. Through the May revision and budget negotiations, the BCP remained intact in the budget bill passed by the legislature and signed into law. So today we're starting that whole process again for next fiscal year. So as you can see in the middle row on this chart, C2C's current budget is $15.26 million, comprised of approximately $10.26 million ongoing funding from the prior year, plus approximately $5 million ongoing that came from last year's BCP. This is our new baseline, and it includes authority and funding for 10 new positions, as discussed this morning. The one-time funds available last year, shown on the first row of the chart, that $13.3 million, did not carry forward to this year. Slide. This year, our budget change concept, the BCC, aims to achieve two strategically important objectives. The first is to establish a permanent Chief Information Security Officer role. C2C's CISO role is presently filled by Mike Rocky, who you saw this morning, in a retired annuitant capacity, meaning that he's a retired state employee authorized to work limited hours. And since a retired annuitant is not a sustainable long-term solution to C2C's information security needs, we're asking for one information technology manager 2 position and associated funding ongoing to establish that permanent capacity. The second component of our BCC is to create a detailed implementation roadmap for the expansion of eTranscript California, a standing task force of higher education and other partners, and planning for initial IT procurements. You'll hear more about this work in agenda item 16 later this afternoon. Our proposed budget ask this year is approximately $826,000. Concurrent with the budget request, the office will also be working on getting flexibility in the budget for the data system build, the project, to ensure it's fully resourced by requesting a mechanism be added to C2C's budget that allows the Department of Finance to increase the office's expenditure authority for the project to the extent that in the future, project costs might come in higher than expected or existing contracts are insufficient. Next slide. So for this item, staff recommends the board approve the budget change concept and authorize the office to work with the board chair and chair-elect to finalize a formal budget change proposal submission in collaboration with GovOps leadership and the Department of Finance. That concludes my presentation, so I'll turn it back to Chair Fong. I'd be glad to answer any member questions.
Thank you, Leslie. Do we have questions from our members? Questions or comments? The budget change concept. No. All right, with that said, thank you, Leslie, for your presentation. I'd like to now ask for a motion to approve the budget change concept as specified in the staff report. A motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Gavin, for the first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, before we move into a vote, let's go ahead and take public comment.
All right, so folks on the line that would like to participate in this agenda item, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm just noting that currently I'm not seeing anybody with a hand raised, so I'll give you another moment. Okay, seeing no public comment here in Sacramento, on the line, and in our remote location, we can close public comment.
Great, thank you, Mary Kate. So with that said, we have a motion and a second for the approval of the budget change concept. Please take us into roll call.
Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes.
Yes.
Member Cochran.
Yes.
Member DeGear.
Yes.
Member Ella Rivera. Member Evans.
Yes.
Member Frigielli.
Yes.
Member Hetz. Alternate Mar for Member Irwin.
Yes.
Member Jess.
Yes.
Member Reyes for alternate Reyes for Member Laird.
Yes.
Member Lee.
Yes.
Member Moldoff.
Yes.
Member Ohanian.
Yes.
Member Payne.
Yes.
Member Romero.
Yes.
Member Vu.
Yes.
Member Winkler.
Yes.
18 ayes.
With 18 yeses, the motion passes. Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to agenda item 12, presentation and preview of the reports of the legislature. So as code section 10866 requires that the office annually submit a report to the legislature of its activities. I'll ask Shannon Serrato, our Director of Engagement, to come to the podium, thank you, to provide us a presentation of this item.
Thank you, Chair Fong. I hope everyone can hear me. I have a mask on, so I'll try to project. Good afternoon. I'm Shannon Serrato, the Director of Engagement here at Cradle-to-Career, and I'm glad to be here with you today to discuss CTC's 2023 report to the legislature. As with all other items, I would like to refer members of the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. And if you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the CTC site.
Hello, this is the ASL interpreter. I am having a difficult time understanding you. You're not loud enough and you're kind of fast.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So as mandated in Education Code, section 10866, the office is required to submit regular reports to the governor and California State Legislature related to the implementation of the data system. And this year's report will document the progress made in the 2022-2023 year. The first year prioritized continuity with the vision and plans defined during the 18-month planning process. Now in its second year, CTC is focused on advancing the strategic vision, mission, and goals of the Office of the Cradle-to-Career Data. As you heard earlier today, as part of the strategic planning process, Cradle-to-Career identified problems and areas of opportunity that can be addressed through the work of the office. The report to the California State Legislature takes an in-depth look at the progress made across all CTC's departments, which includes operations, engagement, analytical tools, practical tools, and boards. The report also outlines the priorities, goals, and objectives of the office for the coming year. The report to the governor and California State Legislature is due on September 1st. So in lieu of the final report, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of CTC's progress in 2022-2023 by the numbers, highlighting the accomplishments and milestones achieved this year. So This is just, you've heard much of this before, but this is what's going to be the reports. I wanted to make sure you heard it again. While Cradle-to-Career was signed into law just 2 years ago, we're now in our 3rd year. The work of the office really ramped up last year with the expansion of the CTC team. This year filled the initial authorized 16 positions, with the team growing what seems like every day. I always say that CTC is small but mighty, but we are getting stronger with every new hire. And as a team, we've been building the foundation of the office that guides our work. Along with CTC's vision and mission, we work together to create CTC's values, the core principles that define how we interact with each other as a staff and with our stakeholders. The 5 values that drive our work and what the team leans on as we build the data system are advancing equity, transparency, accountability, collaboration, and curiosity. This year alone, we've built on the great work done during the planning process. Approved by the governing board earlier this year, CTC added 20 new data points to over 200 data elements as part of the build of CTC's data dashboards, query builder, and resource request system. And in less than a year, the CTC data infrastructure team led by Dan Lamery completed the project approval lifecycle or PAL process for a system integrator, which assists CTC with the implementation, planning, coordination, and testing of the system, and will be responsible for integrating and configuring data and securing data originating from CTC's data providers. And all of that work was enabled by the support of operations, led by Leslie Taylor, who you just heard from. The admin team completed 65 contracts and procurements this year. We have translation services and interpretation services that are supporting this meeting virtually today. We've engaged a consultant who will enable us to conduct a student experience audit this year that ensures the voices of students and their families are centered as we build and scale tools that will help them navigate their educational and career journeys. And we have a robust technology stack that supports the annual infrastructure of the data system, just to name a few. And finally, a recurring theme this year is that as a new state entity, we're truly building the office from the ground up every way. And we're super excited, as you all have seen 1,000 times now, to have the brand foundation. The logo is the brand identity that was just revealed a few months ago. As Marianne mentioned, we're all well on our way to establishing a vibrant and cohesive brand identity that reflects the vision and mission of the Cradle-to-Career data system, and look forward to building on that foundation as we relaunch the new website later this year and launch the first data dashboards that will continue on in our branding journey next year. Next slide, please. While we're super proud of what we've done as a team, we take an equal amount of pride in the work that we've accomplished with our key partners and stakeholders, which I'll touch upon now. Along with building CTC's analytical tools, we are charged with expanding access to operational tools to better serve educators, students, and their families. We are proud to promote californiacolleges.edu, intended to be the state's one-stop shop for applying to public colleges and universities for financial aid, which has 1.5 million accounts provided to 6th through 12th grade students in California, and is primed for even more growth with a partnership between CCGI and CDE that will grant free universal basic accounts to all 6th through 12th grade California students by fall 2024. Time is flying, but it was only last year when we seated our first community engagement and data and tools advisory board members. CTC's Community Engagement Advisory Board examines whether the office is creating strong feedback loops with data users, supporting evidence-based decision-making, analytical capacity, and ensuring equitable access to actionable information. And our Data and Tools Advisory Board members are charged with examining whether the data system is providing actionable information and identifying ways to improve access to that information. A third of our advisory board members cycle off each year, and as discussed earlier today, we've received exactly 118 applications for 11 open slots. We were overwhelmed by the outpouring of support of interest this year, and we're grateful to have the support of such a strong, intelligent, and talented community that is so engaged in the work and committed to supporting the students of California. CTC looks forward to welcoming our new community engagement and data and tools advisory board members this year. But we know that it's going to take more than just 32 people to build the data system. And we all look forward to engaging the broad members of the public for input and feedback on the build of the data system. This year alone, we held 26 public meetings, both in person and virtual, from governing board meetings like these to advisory boards and ad hoc committee meetings and our community conversations. It is critical that CTC hears early and often from all of our stakeholders as we aim to build the most inclusive data system in the nation. And we take this very seriously. We've had over 500 members of the public registered for our community conversations, and as our staff grows and the work expands, We look forward to doing many more in the coming year. And beyond our meetings, we're looking for opportunities to engage with members of the public through various channels. In 1 year alone, CTC gained over 600 new followers on LinkedIn, many of which are people in the room today, along with our meetings, blogs, and newsletters, ensuring that we're engaging with members of the community early and often, that they are included in the work and have opportunities for input and feedback that will help build of the data system. And finally, I wanted to thank all of you in this room for your participation in CTC's governing board demographic survey. We are proud to share that we have 100% response rate, which not only reflects C2C's values of equity and transparency, but also ensures the board represents the key stakeholders of the California Cradle-to-Career data system and the wide range of Californians that we are charged with serving. This concludes my presentation. I would be glad to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Shannon, for that update. It's really impressive just to see what the small but mighty team has accomplished already, this being its first year being together. So I'd like to open it up for comments and questions from our board members. Anything for Shannon today? Yes, Marisol.
Marisol Laviña, public member. Thank you, Shannon, for the wonderful report. And I wonder, to the previous agenda item, to what extent would this report include maybe some of that background of the additional budget needs that will be, as they want to cover themselves and then eventually make it to the next. So I wasn't sure.
Yes, no, this is a very much a high level report now, but it's going to be more in depth, definitely highlighting the needs of the office going forward, as well as what we've done with the funds for this last year. So kind of two-pronged approach, right? Showing folks what we've done, but also showing what additional resources we may need to support the data system going forward.
Meredith.
Meredith Lee, board member. I would just +1 to that. I really appreciate seeing just in a couple of visuals by the numbers. And I think maybe there's an opportunity to really show, so we have 100 or 1,000 or how much, but really the unserved population that we could be moving forward to help address. And also just shout out to your leadership, Shannon, and the rest of the team, because I remember when you just started and you had all of these ideas, and it's so impressive to see how much of that is now, like, we have results to point to. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Shannon? All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Next slide. All right, so we'll be moving on now to agenda item 13, approval of the minutes from the June 9th, 2023 Strategic Planning Ad Hoc Committee meeting. I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed from the CTC website. As Robert mentioned earlier, during agenda item 9, the Strategic Planning Ad Hoc Committee met last June. Last met in June. As we are not certain the time frame of when that committee will meet next, we would like to have those meeting minutes be available to the public. So they're being brought here today for a vote. So please note that only members of the committee that were asked are being asked to vote on this particular item. So are there any additions or corrections to the June 9th strategic planning meeting minutes from the members of that committee? Or none, I have a motion to approve the June 9th, 2023 committee meeting minutes from the members. I'm sorry, who was first? Jessica, and a second? Second from Tom, thank you. So let's go ahead and pause for public comment. Do we have any?
For members of the public that would like to comment on this item, please feel free to raise your hand. Currently, I'm not seeing anybody with their hand raised, but I'll give you a moment. Seeing no change in status, we can close public comment at this time. There's no one in this room, no one virtually, and no one in Riverside.
All right, so we should have a short roll call vote. Again, this is to approve the minutes from the June meeting. Okay.
Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes,
Yes.
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Moldoff,
Yes.
Member Payne,
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
and Member Vu.
Yes.
7 ayes.
With 7 ayes, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. So now we'll move on to agenda item 14, the approval of the minutes from the June 23, 2023 Advisory Board Selection Ad Hoc Committee, so similar to the last time. Refer to the staff report that's drafted for this item. If you're a member of the public and you would like to follow along, that staff report can be accessed from the Cradle-to-Career website. As Gavin mentioned, during agenda item 5, the selection ad hoc committee met in June. The committee will meet again in the spring, but may not have the same composition of members. If we'd like to make those meeting minutes available to the public, we brought those meeting minutes here today for a vote. So once again, only members of the committee will be asked to vote on this particular item. Are there any additions or corrections to those meeting minutes? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the June 23rd meeting minutes as submitted? Thank you, Marisol. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Gavin. We'll go ahead and take public comment on this item.
We will now be opening it up for public comment. So if there's any members on the line that would like to comment, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing anybody at this time. I'll give you a moment. And seeing no change in status, I'd like to confirm that there's nobody in this room, in Riverside, or via Zoom that would like to comment on this public item, so we will close it.
Okay. So once again, that motion is to approve the meeting minutes from this ad hoc committee. Thank you. We'll take this roll call vote.
Member Payne,
Yes.
Member Alva, who's no longer with our board, Member Avina,
Yes.
Member Cochran,
Abstain.
and Member Vu.
Yes.
That's 3 ayes, and we need 3 ayes for it to pass.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right, so the Community Engagement and Data and Tools Advisory Boards had their first meeting in June. This meeting was important in that it laid out the groundwork for the recommendation process that our advisory boards will partake in each year. We will now move on to agenda item 15, an update from the Data and Tools and Community Engagement Advisory Board's joint meeting. To hear more about that meeting, I'd like to invite Michelle Cheng, Community Engagement Advisory Board member, to present on this item.
Good afternoon, governing board members. I am Dr. Michelle Chiang, a Community Engagement Advisory Board member. I'm also a nonprofit executive, currently serving as the director of Catalyze. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I would like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public, you would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. As Chair Fong mentioned, the Community Engagement and Data and Tools Advisory Boards met in June. We met to discuss 2 main components. Next slide, please. The 2 main components were around the presentation on the P20W dataset and to review recommendations on the forms and rubrics. The governance manual states that prior to the fall advisory board meeting, the office will convene a public meeting where advisory board members can learn more about available data points and ask questions to the data providers in the office regarding any additional information that is needed or that would be useful to access through C2C. The amazing Ryan Estrellado, the Director of Data Programs, provided the advisory boards a presentation on the P20W dataset that included the 20 new data sets that were approved by the governing board in the May meeting. As the presentation finished and concluded, there was an open forum where subject matter experts were given the opportunity to provide more information, answer any questions that really gave us the space as advisory board members to ask around how were the data points identified and any other clarification that was needed. We really appreciate the time to come together as an advisory board from the community engagement piece and the data and tools. So we think about how we're using and talking about our P20W data sets. Next slide. After the presentation on the P20W datasets, we also talked about a recommendation process to provide an overview of the recommendation process from the advisory boards to the governing board. Every fall, as a reminder, the community engagement and data and tools advisory boards can provide recommendations. It's important to note that since the two advisory boards have a different scopes, the type of recommendations will be different and will vary. Specifically, the community engagement boards, our recommendations focus more on feedback loops with data users, thinking of evidence-based decision-making and analytical capacity, as well as thinking of how it is that we're using the data and equitable access to any information that is received from the C2C office. On the other hand, the data and tools advisory board members are really looking at recommendations focused on changes to the data request process, any changes to the dashboards or practical tools for students or other folks to use, adding data points that are not currently available, or adjusting any current existing P20W datasets. As both advisory boards will be submitting recommendations in the fall, we reviewed the recommendations form and rubric, which we will use to score our top proposal forms. We can also make sure you can refer to attachment A, B, C, and D of the staff report if you would like to see more of the rubrics and the information. As this slide notes, the next steps for the advisory boards are to submit any recommendations using the forms. The recommendations will become publicly available, and then the members will rank their top recommendations prior to the fall meeting. At the fall meeting, we will decide which recommendations should scale up to move to feasibility studies. And then from there, we will meet again as an advisory board to determine in the spring which recommendations will be moved to governing board based on any findings that we have from the feasibility studies. Next slide. For our upcoming dates, we will be meeting in person. I'm really excited to meet folks in person. We have our community engagement meeting September 12th and the data and tools meeting on October 12th. If folks want to meet via in person, we'll be at the Foundation for California Community Colleges, where they can also meet virtually. This concludes my presentation. I will now pass it back to Chair Fong. Thank you, members, for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Member Chang, for your presentation. We appreciate the procedural reminders and definitely those dates related to the advisory board's activities. The governing board is really appreciative of all of the work that you are doing for our board. I'd like to open it up now for a member comment or question. None in the room. Can you check with Kathy? No hand raised. All right. So we will go ahead and move on to agenda item 16, update on the e-transcript California stakeholder interviews. As Robert mentioned during agenda item 9, Cradle-to-Career is trying to coordinate with partners to reduce barriers to students and to create a roadmap for how e-transcript can be a seamless platform for transferring transcripts across post-secondary institutions. The governing board has not heard too much about e-transcript and really look forward to this presentation today. I'd like to invite Judy Chen, Deputy Director of Digital Services, to the podium to present and ask. Thank you.
I'm Judy Chan, Deputy Director of Digital Services at Cradle-to-Career. It is with great pleasure that I'm able to provide an update on the e-transcript stakeholder interviews for you today. I would like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. Next slide, please. Next slide. So eTranscript California is a statewide transcript exchange system funded by the California Community College Chancellor's Office and managed by the Tech Center. It supports electronic transcript exchange across post-secondary institutions. eTranscript California is used in the higher education space and facilitates institution-to-institution transmission of transcripts. It takes into account California-specific elements like the IGETC, GE Rep, and the Associate's degree for transfer. The most popular use case is when students transfer institutions from a community college to a four-year institution. This is different from the work that CCGI is doing in the K-12 space, supporting initial post-secondary enrollment. With the increased participation in dual enrollment, which enables students to earn college credit while in high school, and the need for information to flow between K-12 and higher education in both directions, there is a potential overlap in the population of students that are served. E-transcript has only been partially adopted by California 2-year and 4-year institutions and to varying degrees. Currently, 104 of the community colleges, 20 of the state colleges, 6 of the UCs, and 3 AICCUs participate in E-transcript California. E-transcript has a feature that allows community colleges to automatically send transcripts to CSU free of charge to the student. Unfortunately, few colleges are making full use of E-transcript's features and have instead adopted a range of solutions for transmitting information about students' academic histories, including the use of third-party vendors whom students must pay in order to request and transmit transcripts. Even with the use of third-party vendors, there are inconsistent formats, poor coordination, and challenges to juggling multiple avenues of delivery, making the exchange process slow and labor-intensive. Students are the ones who pay the price when transcripts aren't sent, including delayed admissions, denial of admissions, repeated courses, and other missed opportunities. Students face enough challenges with only 40% of students who intend to transfer doing so within 6 years. Only 2.5% do so in 2 years. Complicated transfers prolong the time required for graduation and can prevent students from obtaining their degrees entirely. If the state wants to meet its long-term goal of 70% of Californians adults having meaningful credentials, then we must invest in the infrastructure and processes to support students. We must remove the barriers that are actively interfering with students reaching their full potential. It's an educational and equity imperative. Scaling E-transcript California presents an opportunity to facilitate student access to transfers and make the process less taxing for all. Per the statute, C2C shall provide expanded access to tools and services that support the navigation of the education to employment pipeline. Scaling California colleges.edu, which includes high school transcript services, will help streamline college applications for K-12 students. Statute also identified E-transcript as a tool that can be leveraged to streamline the exchange of transcripts between post-secondary institutions. During the planning process, 3 use cases were identified for further exploration, including how E-transcript California could, 1, streamline the transfer of information in the college and transfer process, 2, expand the types of records that can be shared to support skills-based hiring, and 3, identify individuals who are eligible for public benefits. Next slide, please. In March of this year, we asked West Ed to conduct stakeholder interviews with higher education segments and students in order to understand their current system for sending and receiving transcripts and identify issues that must be addressed to scale E-transcript California. The interviews included representatives from the different higher ed segments, including California Community Colleges, California State University, University of California, and the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities, the AICCU. The interviewees included post-secondary segment leads, A&R or enrollment staff, IT staff, faculty, and student representatives. Next slide, please. Some of the general findings were due to changes from COVID-19 and the campus closures that resulted during that time, colleges have greatly increased the use of electronic transcripts. This is an improvement over paper transcripts and has led to improved tracking and more timely sending and receiving of transcripts. However, West Ed found that few colleges are making full use of E-transcripts features. Instead of automatically sending transcripts, most post-secondary and dual enrollment students must request and pay for transcripts from third-party vendors. In order to understand E-transcript's potential, it's important to understand the ways it can be used. There are 3 ways to use E-transcript in California. The first way is accepting electronic transcripts. Members are receivers in this case. They receive incoming transcripts, and this requires the least effort in terms of participation. All 104 community colleges that participate in e-transcript are receivers, and 45 community college participants only participate as receivers. In addition to receiving transcripts, some colleges use e-transcript to also send electronic transcripts. These member colleges are senders. Currently, 59 community colleges are participating in this way. Integration is costly, so typically colleges will pay a third-party vendor to process requests to send transcripts via an integration with e-transcript. Students are then sent to a vendor platform in order to request and pay for the transcript. The third way to use e-transcript is called accepting electronic requests. This is a peer-to-peer exchange and the ideal way to use e-transcripts. When a member accepts electronic requests, they allow receiving institutions to batch request transcripts. Transcripts are then delivered automatically without requests or payments from students. Only 22 of the 116 community colleges currently use this feature. So there are a number of benefits that are associated with the use of e-transcripts. eTranscript California delivers standards-based transcript data designed for California-specific elements. Data-based transcripts minimize errors and expedite admissions evaluations. It is an improvement over paper transcripts or any sort of PDF or image-based transcript. When used in the ideal manner, CSU, UC, AICCU can use eTranscript to batch request transcripts, meaning that students don't have to do the extra work of requesting transcripts themselves. For community colleges, there's no fee for participation in eTranscript, and the tech center via its vendor with ZAP is able to provide support for integration. In addition, eTranscript has a reporting feature that offers transparency into where students and transcripts are going. The use of eTranscript California is not without its challenges. Integration with campus student information systems can be costly and technically challenging to connect to eTranscripts. And because eTranscript California was intended to be used as an institution-to-institution exchange, there is no student user interface that allows students to order and track transcripts. Retrofitting is needed to accommodate outside solutions and vendors. There are some technical issues that exist, including missing transcript requests or duplicate delivery of transcripts. Also, as mentioned earlier, there's inconsistency in community college participation. So going back to the stakeholder interviews, for the first use case of streamlining transfer of information, West Ed found that there's inconsistency in how data is sent and how data is formatted. Institutions juggle multiple platforms to get data. Also, where and how information is flagged differs, which adds to staff review time and makes the entire process slow and labor intensive. Students are often confused about which transcripts are required, how requests are fulfilled. The confusion can increase if a student attended multiple colleges, which have different processes, platforms, and fees. Sometimes students may encounter different fees for the same process on the same platform. Four-year institutions are supportive of eTranscript California, but want a more automated process so that students don't have to initiate or pay for transcripts. For this automation to happen, eTranscript has to be integrated into each institution's SIS. Institutions have already invested in their own IT campus solutions, and integration is costly, which is why colleges often utilize vendors to outsource this task and investment. Currently, there's no single tool or solution that will be able to address the complexity of the state's technology needs and adoption practices. There will always be a need for vendors, especially when it comes to older, out-of-state, and international transcripts. Therefore, in order to streamline the transfer information, the recommendations are: 1, developing interoperability standards that allow information to be provided in a consistent manner. State data standards can be leveraged for vendors to deliver data in agreed upon formats that can be easily digested by a variety of SISs, allowing colleges to use their existing platforms and processes. 2, maximize the ability to automate sending transcripts through eTranscript California by embedding a transcript request process into college application forms. And 3, develop an informational campaign to communicate the value of eTranscript California and how that automation features could remove the need to charge students to cover the cost of sending transcripts. The second use case explored for eTranscript is skills-based hiring and expanding the types of records that could be shared in a verified electronic transcript exchange. This represents a powerful opportunity for enacting equity practices that represent the whole learner and better support them in their education to employment pathway. It enables students to demonstrate their skills in a way that traditional credentials do not capture, and it opens up opportunities to education and employment from which they may have been otherwise excluded. There are a range of non-traditional records that could be captured in transcripts, including credit for prior learning, industry and military training certifications, electronic portfolios, and digital badges. So currently, there are no formalized standards in California specific to workforce, co-curricular, or other data not generated directly from education institutions. Although many states, including Alaska, Colorado, Kentucky, Maryland, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, Utah, Virginia, and Alabama are actively incorporating these standards into an enhanced transcript exchange. Therefore, WestEd recommends that the office begins research into exploring data format standards that will allow for the inclusion of third-party credentials to support skills-based hiring. Similar to the first use case, defining data standards will facilitate updates and enhancements to the capabilities of eTranscript California. The second recommendation is to conduct focus group interviews with employers to capture input on skills-based hiring practices. While education is half the ecosystem, the other half is employer-driven and comes from shifts in hiring practices instead to focus on skills instead of degrees alone. This information can support the expansion of eTranscript California by identifying the learning records that employers truly value. The third recommendation is to curate information sessions for participants from all 4 higher ed segments to learn about current ongoing pilots in the California community college system, integrating third-party credentials into academic and career planning. The third use case relates to how eTranscript California could identify individuals who are eligible for public benefits. Supporting students to apply for public benefits requires collecting intake data from students on support services that they might need and are eligible for. Interviews across segments reveal the way that information is captured and shared with support staff varies widely across campuses. There were concerns about timeliness of data. Because campuses need to check this information at the start of every term, it does not make sense to couple this information with existing transcripts that are often delivered only once at the time of application. Students express apprehension around including public benefit eligibility on transcripts due to the highly sensitive nature of the social services information and concerns over who would be able to access this. WestEd recommended that C2C identify other vehicles for providing information about opportunities instead of using the transcript process. This report provides a starting point for understanding the current state of eTranscript California and imagining the possibilities for what could exist. This fall, C2C will commission WestEd to launch a planning process that will continue through the end of the year to create a roadmap for how eTranscript California could become a seamless platform for transferring transcripts across post-secondary institutions. We'll start by identifying the scope of work this month. Then the planning process will explore issues identified in the WestEd report and build upon what we've learned so far. Some topics include interoperability standards for data required in application and transfer processes, infrastructure and new features to strengthen security, integration, and expanded functionality, as well as technical assistance to build awareness and to support implementation. The outcome of the planning process will be a report to CGC that outlines the roadmap for implementation and identifies any remaining issues to resolve. This concludes my presentation. I will now pass it back to Chair Fong and will be available should members have any questions. We also have Aaron Carter on the line from WestEd. He helped conduct the interviews and will be able to answer any, and we will both be available to answer any questions that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, for your presentation. It was really great to hear about the different challenges as well as the scaling options, the opportunities that will make it better for students to apply for California universities. So I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions or comments from our board members. Anything for Judy on this agenda item?
Thank you for this. I wanted to mention Credential Engine, which is a nonprofit. I'm on the board, but I think this is like a benefit of interest versus a conflict of interest. But I encourage us in thinking about the data format standards or for like third-party credentials and the skills-based hiring to look towards the work that Credential Engine's done. It's a nonprofit, a focus on equity, and is doing exactly this kind of work that could support e-transcripts work. And then for the public benefit information, I did not think, like, it was interesting to see that use case here because I had not thought about like e-transcript as a place to connect Californians to public benefits. And the question I have is, does the California Cradle-to-Career data system see itself as a place to help connect Californians to this information? And I ask because right now California competes with other advocacy partners are trying to advocate for the US Department of Ed to change its guidelines on how fast the information is used and who can access that to connect to benefits. And so we've been thinking about to allow systems of higher ed, not just colleges, but I'm also wondering if our letter should now be thinking about statewide agencies. That's like, so I guess, can you help me understand, like, where does the Cradle-to-Career data system sit in this? And should we be thinking about the use of fast information to connect individual Californians to public benefit programs?
I think thank you for your comment on Credential Engine. We are looking into the standards and it will be part of our planning process in the fall. So thank you for that thought. And I would love to hear more from you about that offline. And then as for your question about public benefits, it was a use case that was decided during the planning process as a way of reducing administrative burden on students. As for the larger question about how we plan to use that information statewide, I wonder if some of my colleagues have.
Yeah, I think that's a good question that we should think about and come back to you at the next board meeting on, because I'd like to go back and look at what's in statute specifically, but also as Judy mentioned, in the planning process, this was sort of penciled in as an aspiration for the practical tools. And as was highlighted, the e-transcript is kind of, oh, perhaps that's one mechanism. And then this process that WestEd did with us highlighted some concerns with that. So the underlying goal of making it easier for people to apply for and learn about and access the benefits they're entitled to is definitely something that has been woven through the planning process conversations. And I think right now we're at the moment of really looking carefully at where that could be done best. So thank you for raising the question. Maybe we can put that as a topic that we come back to in November. We'll be happy to learn more offline as well. I was actually going to ask if I can interject one thing before the continuation. I just want to give the Community College Chancellor's Office a big thank you. John Hetz was not able to be here today, very unfortunately, but we've had many conversations with him and with his colleague, Valerie Lindley Wagner, over the last couple months. And so I just wanted to give him and his colleagues a big thank you for all the work that they did with Judy, with our team, with WestEd. And he's had this very clear story to tell about why revamping e-transcript is an imperative for the state, why this is a major equity play that we at Cradle-to-Career and that Use of Board can think about. So just wanted to mention that. We can welcome him to share more of that at our next meeting in November if you would like to, but wanted to highlight that and also connect it back to one of the student stories that we heard in May, if you remember.
with a student who shared the story of driving 3 hours in the hot summer sun to pick up a transcript and move it literally to the place where they were enrolling. So that's part of what I've been thinking about, and I'm sure has been in the back of your mind, but just wanted to give member heads a big shout out, who unfortunately can't be here today, but we look forward to hearing from him in the future too. Debbie.
Thank you for this discussion. I think this is very interesting. I'm perusing the websites right now. So I'm with the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education. I know you talked about the 4 higher education segments in the state. I think that excludes the 900 or so private post-secondary institutions that my agency regulates. So I'm curious what the thinking is about those schools in particular, and whether or not there's a role for them in e-transcript. It's something that, the for-profit college students face pretty consistently. There's a lot of closures in that industry. My agency in particular, we process about 10,000 transcript requests a year. So I love this. I love the idea of this as a potential tool for students, and I would love to see them included, but I also know it does raise other questions. A lot of our, several hundreds of our schools are unaccredited, for instance. Is there a role for this system for supporting those students as well?
So we have not done a thorough inventory of all of the schools that are involved. So far, we focused on the public institutions, but that could be integrated into the planning process, especially if they adopt the standards.
Good way to go.
Question.
Yes, Chris.
Thank you very much for this great presentation. I think it's a very exciting opportunity. I'm just a couple of basic questions. One, for my own awareness, Cradle-to-Career, a big part of it is the operational tools, e-transcript and CCGI. Do they overlap in any way? When we talk about transcript data, obviously CCGI, that's a big part of what they're doing. And this is obviously transcript data, but it's specifically when it says embedding transcript delivery in the college application process. Is there an overlap with CCGI there that I'm not aware of, or maybe there isn't one that I am not aware of?
So thank you for that question. I think that that's a very important topic to address. So CCGI is currently developing their own transcript standards, and that operates mostly in the K-12 space. But in parallel, we are looking to establish standards for post-secondary education institutions. And hopefully with interoperability standards, they can work together and information can be passed back and forth. Which would be really important for, especially with the expansion and participation in dual enrollment.
Okay. And then my other question is, in recent years, I've read about this reverse transfer concept, which I don't know a lot about, but as I understand it, is if somebody transfers from a community college to a 4-year without having completed a degree, a 2-year degree, and then they earn credentials at the 4-year, but maybe they don't complete the 4-year degree. The courses that they may have completed at the 4-year can be transferred back to the 2-year, so they could maybe count towards completion of a 2-year degree. So they end up with a credential in the end, even though they didn't formally complete at either place, which gives people who might not otherwise have a credential. Is that something that this would facilitate?
E-transcript could help with the delivery of the transcripts, and that would help students get credit for the courses that they've already completed. And I'm not so sure about the reverse transfer system, but I'm happy to look into it and get back to you.
I've heard about it. I think it was in Arizona. There were some 2-year and 4-year colleges that were working together with a way of sharing transcript data in both directions, so that somebody could come out of that kind of trajectory with a credential, having completed courses in both systems.
Chris, I will say in California, there is this degrees when due project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think UC, and part of it was reverse transfer was one of the strategies. And I think UC Santa Cruz participated.
Okay.
I don't know the details of how they did it, but And there was a number of community colleges and a handful of CSUs too. I would also be happy to follow up too.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Something new area to investigate. Thank you, Judy. Any other questions or comments? Do you have? None on the line. All right. Thank you, Judy. All right, we'll now move on to agenda item 17, update discussion, public comment, and possible action on policy for requesting an increase to the executive director's salary. As members may recall, the governing board has been working diligently over the past year on the ED review process. In order to help us streamline this process and maintain transparency with the public, we will be discussing adopting a policy. I'd like to invite Julia Blair, General Counsel, to present this item.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Chair Fong. Good afternoon, members. I would like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you are a member of the public and would like to follow along, the staff report can be accessed on the C2C website. At its last meeting, the board voted to delegate to 2 board members, Chair-elect Gorda and Member Payne, to work with me to develop a proposed policy for board consideration. The policy attached to the staff report is the result of that work. In the process, I researched and provided sample policies to Member Payne and to Gorda. However, some of the examples such as CalPERS and UC included more complicated factors such as bonuses and salary surveys that are not relevant to C2C. The proposed policy is similar to policies at other state and boards and commissions that are similar to C2C. This policy outlines the process and criteria to be followed by the board when exercising its discretion to request an increase to the executive director's salary. The process includes completing a performance evaluation of the executive director for the previous year, and the criteria includes making a determination that the executive director has met or exceeded the performance indicators set for the performance evaluation in order to be recommended for a salary increase. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the substance of the policy, and Chair-elect Member Tagorda is available as well to discuss the process of the policy development.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Robert and Gavin, for working on this. I think it's going to be a really important tool for us to use as we move forward and continue that tradition of transparency that we are engendering. So I'd like to open it up now for members for questions or comments on this item.
So if there are no questions, staff recommends to the governing board to move to adopt the proposed policy governing requesting an increase to the executive director's salary.
Oh, I'm sorry, Catalina. I'm so sorry. Not seeing her yet.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies.
All right, with that said, may I have a motion to adopt the proposed policy governing requesting an increase to the executive director's salary?
I move.
Thank you, John. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Debbie. Before we move on, we'll go ahead and hear from public comment.
Okay, we'll now open it up for public comment. I want to note that currently I'm not seeing any hands, but I'll give it a moment. Should anybody choose to comment on this item, please just raise your hand. Okay, seeing no public comment in the room here in Sacramento, nor on Zoom, and not at our other remote location, Riverside, we will be closing public comment.
All right, once again, this is a motion to adopt the proposed policy governing requesting an increase to the executive director's salary. I think really take us through a roll call vote.
Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes.
Yes.
Member Cochran.
Yes.
Member DeGear.
Yes.
Member Ella Rivera. Member Evans.
Yes.
Member Ferjueli.
Yes.
Member Hetz. Alternate Mar for Member Irwin.
Yes.
Member Jazz.
Yes.
Alternate Reyes for Member Laird.
Yes.
Member Lee.
Yes.
Member Moldoff.
Yes.
Member Ohanian.
Yes.
Member Payne.
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Winkler,
Yes.
18 ayes.
Great, with 18, this motion passes. Thank you so much. With the guidance of this policy, we'll be able to approach the executive director review with, I think, a more streamlined approach. So this is great. This is for our next agenda item. This leads us to our next agenda item, which is update, discussion, public comment, and possible action for the formation of an ad hoc committee for executive director review. I'd actually like to invite Mary Kate, Chief of Strategic Initiatives, to present this item.
Afternoon, members. I'm Mary Kate Cruz-Jones, Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships. And as many folks have said before me, I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. And for those of you following along virtually, all of this can be found on our website. So the governance manual states that yearly, a performance review of the executive director is a critical activity to the board, which is intended to support the individual leading the office of Cradle-to-Career and ensure the data system fulfills its mission. The performance evaluation is part of an ongoing, forward-looking and clarifying process between the board and the executive director. There are two parts to this agenda item. First, we need to review and approve the charter, and second, we need to receive volunteers for the committee. I would like to point members' attention to the charter, which is attachment A. This committee will be tasked with conducting the executive director performance evaluation and implementing the board's adopted process for review. The activities conducted by the committee will take place over the next few months. And in February, the full governing board will consider the adoption of the recommended performance evaluation. Upon adoption, the committee charter, the governance manual will be updated to reflect any changes to the evaluation process at the upcoming review of the manual. For this committee, we will need a total of 4 volunteers. The chair of the board will be 1 member. Before any members volunteer, I would like to remind members that the activities of this committee will take place in upcoming months. Additionally, I would ask that members take a look at their current commitments with the board and take that into consideration as they volunteer. And you can find attachment B, which has a breakdown of our current rosters. So, sorry, can we advance the slide? And then we'll go one more. Fabulous. So before I conclude my presentation, staff recommends that the governing board approve the committee charter, designate 5 board members, and including one of those being the board chair, to form this ad hoc committee and authorize the committee to develop a recommended performance evaluation process, and upon adoption of the process by the board, to implement the performance evaluation process. And I'll now pass it back to Chair Fong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. So once again, I'd like to call for actually, let's do board member discussion first. Any questions for Mary Kate on this item?
Catalina, I am not seeing a hand raised.
So let's go ahead and ask for a motion. Motion to approve the committee charter, designate 5 board members, including the board chair, form an ad hoc committee, and authorize that committee to develop a recommended performance evaluation process, and upon adoption of that process by the board, to implement the performance evaluation process.
So moved.
The first from Jerry, the second from, was it John?
Yep.
Yes, thank you. All right, before we take action, let's go ahead and move into public comment.
Okay, we'll now be taking public comment on this agenda item. So if there are any folks on the line that would like to join us, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands at this time, so I'll give you a moment. Seeing no folks raising their hand, we'll close public comment. So that will be in Sacramento. There was nobody with comment on Zoom and nobody in Riverside as well. So public comment is closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. So once again, this is a motion to approve the committee charter, designate 5 board members, including the board chair, to form the ad hoc committee, authorize that committee to develop a recommended performance evaluation process, and then upon adoption of that process by the board, then to carry out the performance evaluation itself. Mary Kate, will you take us through roll call vote?
Sure. Just quick logistical question in terms of getting members to volunteer. Will folks reach out offline after, or do we have any folks in the room today?
Oh. Would anybody like to volunteer in the room? If not, we'll go ahead and have you reach out directly to Kate.
Sure. Okay. Perfect. I'll start the roll call vote. Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes.
Yes.
Member Cochran.
Yes.
Member DeGear.
Yes.
Member Elo Rivera. Member Evans.
Yes.
Member Frigielli.
Yes.
Member Hetz. Alternate Mar for Member Irwin.
Yes.
Member Jez.
Yes.
Alternate Reyes for Member Laird.
Yes.
Member Lee.
Yes.
Member Moldoff.
Yes.
Member Ohanian.
Yes.
Member Payne.
Yes.
Member Romero.
Yes.
Member Vu. Member Winkler.
Yes.
18 ayes.
With 18 ayes, the motion passes. Thank you very much. It's not 2:30 yet. So we're gonna forgo the 10-minute break and press on. That's okay with everybody. All right, so our next agenda item, it's 19. Update discussion, public comment, and possible action on consideration of an increase to executive director salary. So I'd like to refer members to the staff report that was drafted for this particular agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, of course, that is accessible from the Cradle-to-Career website. Earlier today, our governing board members approved a policy for requesting an increase to the executive director's salary. So that policy is attachment A in the staff report, and it stipulates the criteria that must be met in order for an increase to be awarded. Last February, the governing board presented the performance evaluation to the governing board in closed session and concluded this conversation at the May governing board meeting in closed session. Through these conversations, it has been determined that the executive director has met or exceeded the performance indicators. I recommended that the governing board move to recommend that the board request a 5% increase to the executive director's salary and authorize the board chair to work with the director of operations, Leslie Taylor, and general counsel Julia Blair to complete the process required to make this request. So I'd like to open it up first for member questions and comments on this item. Any questions or comments from members?
No.
I will make one comment. As a brand new member, I will be abstaining from this vote since I was not privy to the prior process. So, thank you.
All right, may I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Meredith. Have a second?
Second.
Javier? All right, so this, once again, this is a motion to recommend the board request a 5% increase to the executive director's salary and authorize the board chair work with director of operations and general counsel to complete that process. Open it up for public comment before we take action.
Perfect. We'll now be opening it up for public comment, as Chair Fong just mentioned. So if any folks in the public would like to join us, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time. I'll give you an additional minute, seconds. Not seeing any change. We can close public comment. There's nobody in the room here in Riverside or on Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you for confirming, Mary Kate. Will you go ahead and take us through roll call?
Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes.
Yes.
Member Cochran.
Yes.
Member DeGear.
Yes.
Member Elo Rivera. Member Evans.
Abstain.
Thank you. Member Frigielli.
Yes.
Member Hetz. Alternate Mar for Member Irwin.
Yes.
Member Jez.
Yes.
Alternate Reyes for Member Laird.
Yes.
Member Lee.
Yes.
Member Moldoff.
Yes.
Member Ohanian.
Yes.
Member Payne.
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Winkler,
Yes.
18 ayes.
Thank you. With 18, the motion passes. Congratulations, Mary Ann, for a job well done. Thank you so much. We appreciate your hard work, and we've completed, the office's inaugural year with great success and under your leadership. Thank you so much. Don't push me. All right, thank you, everyone. So we'll now move on to agenda item 20, discussion and possible action on the 2024 proposed governing board meeting dates. As the governing board continues to establish itself, we begin formalizing process, when is public voting on our future governing board meeting dates. So I'd like to ask Mary Kate to go ahead and present this item.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chair Fong. So I'd like to refer members again to the staff report that was drafted for this item. Members at home, this is also available on the website. So, just as the office is growing and we're getting more formalized processes, this is one thing that we'll see every year. We'll be bringing forth the following year dates for members to vote and just kind of memorialize things in a more formal way. In looking at proposed dates for next year, we kept in mind the current cadence of our meetings hosted by other data providers that have been publicly posted, as well as holidays observed by the state of California and religious holidays of observance. So the proposed dates are listed. I do want to say there was a little mistake here. August 9th is the date of this year's meeting. Next year, the proposed would be August 14th. So to keep that in mind, I know that that's different than what's publicly posted. But if folks are okay with this, the staff recommendation, which is on the next slide, is to approve the 2024 board meeting dates, not as presented, given the update of the one date, August 14th, considering my
As amended.
Thank you. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Fong. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from board members?
Just one really quick one. Just to flag that this schedule would have a 4-month gap between November and the February, and then a 2-month gap between the next two. Just to flag that that's okay with what we have going on for those meetings and what's going on between now and then.
The context for that is that we found the February meeting last year to be challenging, combined with the holidays and people being off at the end of the year and having a meeting at the very beginning of February. It compressed the time for the committees who met between the November and February meeting quite a bit. And so we thought that moving it to the end of February would both help that. And in the middle of February, there's a lot of vacation time as well. So the choice point was kind of very beginning of February or end of February. And we felt that that might ease the workflow for committees who are doing work like the governance manual updates, for instance, before the February meeting. Thank you for highlighting.
That makes sense with the holiday schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a short one. Any thoughts or comments?
Just a question. I know that there are still some open questions about allowances for virtual meetings and what that might look like. I know the tentative location it appears to be in person for each of these. If virtual meetings were to be fully allowed, is there a thought about what might happen with the governing board meetings, or would they remain in person? Is that the intent?
Do you have a suggestion?
No, just a question.
I think it's worthy of consideration, especially as, people's schedules, are a little bit different post-pandemic and so forth, and ability to travel and so forth. And definitely, we find value in meeting in person today, especially as noted that, even though we had like the 2 extra minutes for lunch, it seemed like we could have used more. So really do appreciate us being able to get together in person, but I do understand that there can be a need to be able to meet virtually, and that does happen from time to time. So we'll certainly take that into consideration.
And I'll just add, this is General Counsel Blair. If Bagley Keene is the exceptions that were permitted during the pandemic are extended for next year, there can be a hybrid option, which is something that other entities have done in the past and is semi-occurring right now since we've noticed member Cifuentes location. So there would be ways in which we could do both in person and have a virtual component.
All right, seeing no other questions or comments, may I have a motion to approve the board meeting dates as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Nathan. Second? Thank you, Amelia. Marisol. Can we go ahead and check for public comment?
Perfect. We'll now be opening it up for public comment. I'm seeing no hands at this time, but I'll give folks another second. Seeing no change in status, no public comment in this room, and no public comment in Riverside, we will be closing public comment.
Okay, and once again, this is to approve the board meeting dates as amended. Okay.
Member Fong,
Yes.
Member Tagorda,
Yes.
Member Josie, Member Avina,
Yes.
Member Cifuentes,
Yes.
Member Cochran,
Yes.
Member DeGear,
Yes.
Member Ella Rivera, Member Evans,
Yes.
Member Ferjueli,
Yes.
Member Hatz, alternate Mar for Member Irwin.
Yes.
Member Jazz,
Yes.
alternate Reyes for Member Laird,
Yes.
Member Lee, Member Moldoff,
Yes.
Member Ohanian,
Yes.
Member Payne,
Yes.
Member Romero,
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Winkler,
Yes.
17 ayes.
Okay, with 17, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, with that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is future agenda items. This is where we get to have the members speak up. So members, at this time, you may request future agenda items, things that you would like to hear about.
For the future data provider updates, were we gonna talk about, I feel like someone alluded that we were gonna talk about perhaps who might be coming to speak with us, and then if there are any specific questions we have in advance.
Yeah, if you do have something that you would like to hear from a specific data provider or a member of the board, please let us know.
I just really enjoy the data provider updates and the information shared. So I would encourage to do as many of those as possible.
Perhaps one thing our office could offer is to draft a potential schedule, and then we can talk with our different data providers about when might be, who might want to present in November versus February versus May. And we could get a schedule on the books and then think about a mechanism for getting your input on topics or questions, so that it can be a conversation that the data providers can also prepare for.
That would be
Would that be
great.
helpful?
That would be very helpful.
We can take that as an action item.
Yes.
I'm not sure how to phrase this, but it's something that kind of came up to me a lot in the strategic planning ad hoc committee. I am curious about basically what the role of Cradle, I guess of the Office of Cradle-to-Career will be in terms of identifying equity gaps. Like I'm not sure to what extent the role of the office is to just make the data available and hope that they will come to identify equity gaps, or if there'll be like an actual effort by the office to like produce reports on the data to say like, we see that like this subpopulation is missing when it comes to like whatever outcome. I know that's a little out of scope because right now we're in this the standing it up thing, but just in terms of like, if there are things I want to hear about, I want to know about like what, like, is the office just going to be objective in providing data, or is there going to be this action from the office that the office like really spearheads to actually make sure that the data is used and it's not just sitting on like a pretty website somewhere.
would be happy to make that a discussion for next time. Maybe one thing we could do is facilitate a conversation about what our role is as an office. We're thinking of some of the statutory language around providing neutral summaries and being stewards of the data, and how that might differ for the role of the board.
Okay.
Which is separate from the role of the office. And you as a board also review the summary, you review the dashboards that we put out, right? You guide that process. So maybe we can have an item that actually digs into, here's what's in statute, here's how we imagine that playing out for our first dashboards, and then that can be a repeating conversation. Would that be helpful? Thank you.
I do not see any other hands up. Anything from council? No. All right, and now we can move into public comment.
Perfect. So for members on the line that would like to make a comment on this item, please feel free to raise your hand. Future agenda items, as Chair Fong had mentioned, are things that you may potentially like to see at a future board meeting recommendations. I'm not seeing any hands at this time. I'll give folks another second. Seeing no public comment in the room in Sacramento, none in Riverside, and none on Zoom, we can close this public comment session.
All right, thank you. All right, so now I would like to refer members to the staff report for this next item, which is elections for the chair-elect. There is a staff report that was drafted for this agenda item. If you're a member of the public and would like to follow along, there is a staff report that can be accessed from our website. Governance manual states that the governing board will elect a chair to serve 2-year staggered terms. In the first year of that term, the newly elected chair-elect will support the presiding chair. In the second year of the term, the chair-elect will then become the presiding chair. All eligible board members who are interested in serving as chair-elect will submit a statement of interest for discussion and a vote at the first governing board meeting of each fiscal year, which is this one here. We have received one submission for chair-elect, and that was from Gavin Payne. Member Payne's statement of interest can be found in attachment A of the staff report. So I recommend that the governing board move to approve Gavin Payne as chair-elect of the board. Before I open it up for member discussion, Member Payne, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I fear that if I open my mouth, I might hurt my chances. I'm glad to answer the questions people have.
Any questions for Gavin? Not encouragement. No, for sure. All right, thank you, Gavin. So may I have a motion to approve Gavin for chair-elect of the board?
I move to approve Gavin Payne as chair-elect of the board.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Sorry, it was
It's all in the-
John. All right, thank you. All right, before we move into action, let's go ahead and do public comments.
Perfect. We will now be opening it up for public comments. So should anybody on the line like to provide public comment on this item, which is limited to the elections for chair-elect, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'll give you another moment. Okay, seeing no hands raised on Zoom, no folks in the room in Sacramento or in Riverside, we will be closing public comment.
All right, so once again, this is a motion to approve Gavin Payne for chair-elect of the governing board. Thank you.
Member Fong.
Yes.
Member Tagorda.
Yes.
Member Josie. Member Avina.
Yes.
Member Cifuentes.
Yes.
Member Cochran.
Yes.
Member DeGear.
Yes.
Member Ella Rivera. Member Evans.
Yes.
Member Fragueli.
Yes.
Member Hetz. Alternate Mar for Member Irwin. Member Jazz.
Yes.
Alternate Reyes for Member Laird.
Yes.
Member Lee.
Yes.
Member Moldoff.
Yes.
Member Ohanian.
Yes.
Member Payne.
Yes.
Member Romero.
Yes.
Member Vu,
Yes.
Member Winkler,
Yes.
17 ayes.
Thank you.
Thank you. With 17 yeses, the motion passes. Congratulations, Gavin, and thank you for stepping up this year. With the chair-elect in place, that will mean that Chair-elect Robert Gorda will now become Chair to Gorda. So before I pass the gavel, I actually want to take a moment for general public comments, since we are, I think, quite a bit ahead of schedule here, and there may be folks that might want to speak up. With public comment. Okay. So this item is for general public.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Fong. So general public comment, meaning it's not limited to any one item. Should folks choose to comment at this time. I'm not seeing any hands raised. We'll give it another second. Seeing no movement and no public comment in Riverside or in Sacramento, I'm going to close general public comment.
Thank you. So, being my host as chair, I just wanted to just say a few words, and I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate how we have all come together through this process. It's been a very quick 2 years. It seemed like for some of us, Chris and Tom, who were part of the 18-month process, it might seem even longer, but still, I just feel like it was just yesterday that we were hearing that big, garbage bin coming through the governor's office. And then we had COVID, but everything through COVID, I think we see time through a different lens. It just works differently. I don't know. So I'm just really I'm still very excited, very passionate about this work. I really much appreciate the relationships that we've built over the course of the last 2 years. I very much appreciate the care with which Mary Ann has approached her work as leader of the office and bringing on board just a collection of individuals who have so smartly and so brightly shined in each of their individual roles to get us to where we are today. With all that said, there is just still so much work to do. We still have to get that data system stood up. We still have to, I think, move forward with enabling, ease of access, ease of use and access to the data that will be in the data system so that people can take action and really improve their opportunities and outcomes. I think it's going to be a little bit of journey, but I really feel positive. I feel very optimistic about our ability to get there as a group. I just feel that there has been tremendous work that has been done behind the scenes that we're starting to see in our board meetings today. We're talking a little bit more about how we support each other, the ambassadorship role that each of us plays in our own agencies to support this work. I think that's very, very important. So somebody, I think a couple of days ago, asked me about my role as chair and if I would be going into a recliner instead. It was some dad joke, but
That's why I laughed.
so I'm looking forward to being a part of the membership and continuing to have these conversations with you all. So thank you so much for your support this last couple of years.
Public comment?
Certainly.
So there's probably few things in the world more difficult than being an inaugural board chair. And you have done it with amazing and skill. So thank you for that. It's been a great ride. Putting the wings on a plane at the same time. So, thank you.
Thank you. And so we have this new gavel. Pass along to Robert. It's your waiting.
Thank you, Board Member Fong. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to partner with you during your tenure as our first C2C Governing Board Chair. You've shepherded our collective work from the planning stages all the way to the establishment of our organization, contributing institutional knowledge and helping to build a collaborative culture. So on behalf of our entire governing board, our office, members of the public, and our fellow Californians, I extend to you this certificate of service. It's a small token of our appreciation, but may it serve as our expression of gratitude for your leadership, collegiality, and commitment to ensuring that the people's data truly do help improve the lives of everyone, particularly the neediest in our state. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So let's move on to the most important role I'll play today, which is let's move to the next slide. Moving on to agenda item number 24, adjournment. Before I officially adjourn the meeting, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today, both in person as well as online. Members of the public who contributed, particularly during public testimony. And those who joined us to comment and contribute to our deliberations today. We depend on participation from our members and the public to keep the momentum of the work going, and we appreciate all thought and input that's been shared today. Today, we made very significant decisions that will guide us through the next year of our work, from the 12-month work plan to the strategic plan and the alignment thereof. We've also put in place 11 advisory board members who will contribute their expertise to our collective work. And we've begun exciting discussions of new endeavors that the office will be undertaking, such as the first data transfer, work related to e-transcript, and the first set of feasibility studies based on advisory board recommendations. So our next governing board meeting will take place on Wednesday, November 1st. We will host members in person and allow any members of the public to join us here at the Foundation for Community Colleges. And for members of the public that would like to join virtually, this option will be available to you as well. So now I'd like to adjourn the meeting at 2:10 p.m. I thank each and every one of you for your contributions today.
Thank you. Thank you.